And look at that. We are live with today's 220-1202. That's our A+ Core 2 study group. We are making it happen. We are here in the studio prepping for today's live stream. We start the live stream at the top of the hour in approximately 9.5 minutes. Currently, I am checking out all of our video inputs, which are working this time. Great story behind that one. I'll have to figure that one out in a bit. Hello, chat room. Hope everybody's well. Good to see you. I am in the process of making sure that all of this is going to work as expected. So far, so good. We are recording. I've already recorded the podcast intro. You missed all of that. It's pretty exciting, me doing a podcast intro. Sorry you missed it. You'll have to catch it next time. I usually do it when the cameras aren't rolling because it's sort of boring. So we don't do any of that. We do have plenty of great questions for you today, though. All, of course, brand new. I write all the questions brand new for each study group. So this will be something that you probably have not seen before. If you have seen it, that would be kind of weird. That'd be just a little bit creepy. So I'm hoping you haven't seen these questions before. Then we've got a whole nother conversation we would have to have. Clearly, we would have to do that. Hope everybody's doing well. It is a rainy couple of days here in Central Florida. We're just dealing with rain. We usually don't have days of rain, but there's a front right over us. We're getting days of rain. Usually the rainy season is the summer. For those of you that have joined us in Central Florida in the summer, you know this. You know that the mornings are good. As soon as lunchtime hits, it could rain for a little bit and then it stops, but they're just awful rain. It's sort of that tropical rain comes through. But having rain all day is something to which we are unaccustomed. So that's what's going on in my world. That's the excitement that is happening here is the weather, which is not great. Although temperature-wise, shall we take a look? Temperature-wise in Central Florida, we are looking at a 75 degrees of Fahrenheit. Hope everybody's doing well. Okay, well, we're doing 1202 today. Hopefully you're there. I've changed around a few things in my studio. You may have noticed. This was up here on the last live stream, but you can kind of see the bottom of it, and you can sort of see a little bit of the screen. I have a teleprompter that I put here, and instead of putting a prompt there, because I don't use a script, but I put the chat there. So now when I talk to you, chat, I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you as I am talking to you. Normally I'd be off to the side, but now the screen is not being used for anything really useful. I need to come up with something to use this screen for, which used to be the chat. So that's one of those things. I have to figure out how to make that all work. Okay. Well, we got lots of Core 2 stuff to do today. Of course, don't forget about the map of the world that is available here. I guess it would be good if I gave you the lower third. It showed professormesser.com/QA is where we will go not only to answer the questions in the first hour, but we will use that same link to be able to submit questions for the second hour. So if there are questions that you would like me to answer, you can do that. I haven't seen Malk in the chat yet, but he's here. I could tell. There he is. There's Malk. He's right there. If anybody's wondering, did I see him pop up? Did I miss him? Did I miss you in the chat, Malk? I don't think I did. I think you've now loaded up the chat. You've gone to get some coffee. There he is. And now you're back. That's what happened. You got a cuppa and you're good. So good. Man, is there a lot going on with IT security these days? I know this is not the security study group. I'm putting together, I always like to talk about some security things in the security study group. There's just so much to talk about. This is for Core 2. Thank you for asking. Today is our Core 2 study group. We could put up maybe, you can kind of see this over there we go. That's not what I was trying to do. That's not what I was trying to do. We'll put it maybe up in the second screen. How about that? No, you can't really see it if I put it on that one. It just says April. Can't really see it over there. We'll figure out the details of this. Okay. So what's nice about that chat is that you're just always there. I can always look at you. Whenever I'm looking into the screen, I'm also reading the chat. Maybe not exactly at the same time because I'm not capable of doing that at the same time, but it's very convenient. I no longer have to look off to be able to comment on what you're doing there. That's the idea. That's what we were shooting for. Well, this is all working well. How are we doing? 4.5 minutes left. For those of you that were here on Monday, this fourth video input that it comes from my laptop. You can see the little video screen that's here and the image that's on this screen are the same. Those are connected to each other. So if I change the screen here, it's going to change there. You get the idea. It's a video switcher. And we could not get that to show that display on Monday. I thought it was the adapter that I'm using on this, but whenever I boot these things up, I usually start up the studio about an hour before we go live. No, technically about 2 hours before we go live. So we usually go live at 12 noon Eastern time. So I usually will set up at 10 o'clock Eastern time. So 2 hours before. And I set up 2 hours before and the screen didn't come on. And I have a whole lot of other things I have to do in the same time. I have to do my podcast intro. I have to make sure I have storage for storing the video. I have to do all of these different things. So I didn't have time to fully troubleshoot. I did a basic troubleshoot and then time was running out. I needed to get some lunch. I needed to prepare myself. I needed to sit down. I needed to get the screen set up. There were a lot of other things that need to happen. Turns out 2 hours is not long enough when there's a problem. So after it was done, I ordered actually before the live stream, I ordered an additional cable that was an HDMI to USB-C, really sort of DisplayPort kind of Thunderbolt cable setup. And then I got those and started really doing some troubleshooting the next day. Turns out it was not the adapter at all. It was not the cable at all. It wasn't anything to do with anything in the existing system. It was all the software configuration on the laptop. For some reason, during an update, I guess, it changed how the video is shared because this is a mirrored display that I've configured here. Well, it's somehow taken itself off of mirrored and was using that output as a second screen. So it really was working perfectly. It was black because the second screen was black. If I had just scrolled over and moved the display over, it would have popped up on the other screen and I would have been fine. After all of that. So it turns out it's an important troubleshooting step for us doing A+, certainly. You know, when you just kind of start throwing things at the wall and not going through the normal troubleshooting process, you miss things. And that was a very simple thing that could have been caught had I really been following the troubleshooting process. But we had a live stream to do. Time was running out. You know, all of those things happen. That happens also with normal problems. But had I started at the very beginning of the troubleshooting process and tested the video output to begin with, I would have seen the things that I saw. But water under a bridge. So not a big deal. It's working. The good part is that it's working. And the good part is that I have an extra cable now in case this really does fail. So it's a win-win in my mind. We are all good in the neighborhood. Next on our list is our live stream. Starts in 1 minute. 1 minute. Hopefully I'm going to remember these questions. I wrote these questions a while back, a lifetime ago. That means the weekend, I guess. So I now have to figure out what the questions were. I guess we'll just figure it out together, right? That's what we'll do. Next, we're just going to keep going down our list of things here. Boy, a lot of people checking in. For those of you not paying attention here, look at how many people are checking in from everywhere in this view. We got a lot going on. Thank you so much for being here. We really do enjoy these live streams. Well, I enjoy these live streams. I'm just glad you're able to join us. It makes it all that much more fun, in my opinion. So it's one of those where I really do like doing the live stream. I would probably do it even if you were not here, but it's so much more fun when you are. I do enjoy chatting with you guys and being in the chat room and doing the Q&A, and it's just a lot of fun to have that happen. Look at that, 12 noon, top of the hour. And this time I can actually go to Keynote. We can hit the play button. Let's get a green button. Wouldn't it be great if the green button wouldn't work anymore? Green button does work, thankfully. There we go. Oh, back home, everybody. I think it's time for a live stream. We'll cue me up over here. We'll get rid of our lower third, and let's get things started. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April 2026 Professor Messer 2201202 Core 2 Study Group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. We get to see just how well you might know some of these topics from these objectives. This is a good chance to test your skills and see how well you might know some of this content from the Core 2 exam. If you are here live, we would love for you to join us on our live stream. And the way that you can join us and interactively answer the questions that we have here is by going to the link on your screen right here. ProfessorMesser.com/QA is the link you would use to be able to not only answer questions in this first hour, but as many of you know, in our second hour, I will be taking your questions. So if there's anything you ever wanted to know about certifications, information technology, or really anything else you'd like to ask, I'll just open it up. I don't know that I will answer anything that you would like to ask, but you could certainly ask it by going to exactly the same link. ProfessorMesser.com/QA is that link. It's a great place to go to be able to answer or to not only answer questions, but ask the questions as well. We've also today, just to see if this works, we have a question from a previous study group to see if it really will work the way we would hope. So here's the way we would find out is we go to this question that you will see pop up on your screen momentarily. If I could only click the question that we have here. The question asks, a technician is following the malware removal process and is preparing to discuss the removal with the end user. Which of the following should be performed just prior to this conversation? Now, for those of you that have not joined us before, the way that we answer these questions is by following the link on the screen at ProfessorMesser.com/QA. That's the link that you would like to use. That's the link you should use. Please do not answer the questions in the chat room. Please do not answer the questions or give hints in the chat room. The question here is a technician's following the malware removal process and is preparing to discuss the removal with the end user. Which of the following should be performed just prior to this conversation? Should we update antivirus software, re-image the system, enable system restore, schedule scans and run updates, or launch safe mode? One of those is the answer. If you think you know the answer, you need to go to that link, ProfessorMesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer, and we will come back to that question in just a bit. Thank you so much for joining us. We do one of these study groups for Core 1 and Core 2 every month. So if you were here, we're doing this live on a Thursday. If you were here back on Monday, you would have been here for our Core 1 study group. This is our Core 2 study group. And when we are not doing a live stream, you can always catch us online somewhere. I'm usually hanging out in our Discord at ProfessorMesser.com/Discord. Maybe I'm looking at our videos and posting new videos on our YouTube channel, which certainly you're subscribed to, correct? What? You're not? You should go over to ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget about our other social media sites. We're located on X and Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook and other places as well. We put our daily pop quiz questions up there on those social media sites. So if you're looking for a question that you can find online, or you would like to receive that question in your email, you can subscribe to that on our website as well. Just another easy way to find us wherever you might be. Of course, during this first hour, as I always do, I will give you some information on how you can earn a 1-hour webinar category CEU. That is a continuing education unit. This is one of the things that you could use to renew your CompTIA certification, for example, or you could use it towards other third-party certifications that will accept continuing education credits. If you don't have an A+ certification yet, this probably won't apply to you, but I would still send you the email just the same. Listen in during this first hour for information and instructions on how you can earn that digitally signed email from me, giving you a 1-hour webinar category CEU. We also, as we are stepping through this today, talking about our Core 2 exam. The Core 2 exam you may also see listed as the 220-1202, 1202. It's also listed on the CompTIA website as V15 for version 15. I don't know why they're giving multiple versions and numbers of things, but there it is. You're covered either way. This was an exam that was released about a year ago on March 25th of last year, 2025. That means that this exam will still be around until approximately September of 2028. So if you're studying this and it's before September of 2028, you're just fine. You're really looking at the right content as long as it says the 220-1202. The 1202 exam is an exam combined with the 220-1201. Both of those together would earn you the A+ certification. So the 1202 exam, on a scale from 100 to 900, you need to score a 700, a little bit more than the Core 1, which needed a 675. And once you pass both of those exams, you are certified for 3 years. So just keep that in mind. The retirement date of the questions and answers is different than the expiration date of an exam once you have earned it. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Once you're certified, really doesn't matter how many times they change the exams, you're already certified. So the important part for you once you get certified is keeping track of that expiration date of your exam so that you can renew it if that's something that you would like to do. Today, we're going to talk about topics specific to the 220-1202 exam, which means the questions today will be based on operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. So quite a bit that we're going to go through, but we'll cover a little bit from all of those. And of course, you can go back and look at all of our replays to get a different set of questions every month. We also create a YouTube video replay of this on our YouTube channel immediately after we're done. It's something done automatically. So after I push the stop button, just a few minutes later, that replay is available for you. I also have audio-only replays that I distribute in podcast format. So if you have a favorite podcast listening program, maybe you use the podcast app that comes with your phone, maybe you use a different podcast function on that, you can do that. Those podcast links are also available in your favorite streaming services. So for example, if you go over to Spotify and you search for Professor Messer, you will also find us there as well. That means that you can either download it to your podcast app or use streaming audio, a place you already have. Those of you that have good internet access, maybe the streaming option is a better one for you. But either way, we've got you covered. You're just fine. You can find that information wherever you happen to be. You'll also notice about a day after our study group, you will find that we have in our YouTube video description a timestamp list showing exactly what happened in this live stream and when. And you can click on those timestamps and go directly to that section of the video. Those timestamps are there thanks to my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this in the replay. Hi, Lori. She's going through the process of putting in those timestamps, probably listening to this at 2x speed and wishing there was a 4 or 5x. I understand. I've been there. As someone who edits my own video, sometimes I would like maybe if I talked a little bit faster, that wouldn't be a bad thing. Thank you, Lori, for doing that. If that's something you like to use in the chat room, give Lori a heart. Let her know that that's something that you like to use as well. We do spend a lot of time, and you can go back years with these videos to find those timestamps. So hopefully that's something that has helped you as well. When I am not here, I'm also over on Discord. I mentioned that earlier. You can go to professormesser.com/Discord and you can join us as well. We have thousands of people that are in our Discord server that are studying for their A+, Network+, Security+, and other certs. It's a great way to meet people, study with folks, do some Q&A with each other. Make sure that you check that out at professormesser.com/Discord. Eventually, you will need to take your A+ exam, and if you're in the US or Canada, I would love to be able to use this capability, to take advantage of this capability to save a little bit of money on your exam. That might be a good one as well. Saving money on your exam can be critical. And of course, this is something that you could go out to CompTIA's website and pay full price for exactly the same vouchers, or you could go to professormesser.com/vouchers and get a discount that's already built into the price. You don't need a special coupon code. You don't need to add any special extensions to your browser. There's no secret to get the discount, it's already included in the price. What could be easier than that? Not only am I giving you a discounted voucher, I'm giving you also something you can't get anywhere else and you can't buy it. It's my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook I wrote with tips and tricks that can help you during the study process and strategies you can use during the exam itself to maybe get a couple of extra points. And who wouldn't want that? Learn more about this available at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question I asked earlier, and let's see how you did. The question asked, a technician is following the malware removal process and is preparing to discuss the removal with the end user. Which of the following should be performed just prior to this conversation? This, of course, is referencing the 10-step malware removal process in the A+ exam objectives. The options that I provided you were update antivirus software, re-image the system, enable system restore, schedule scans and run updates, or launch safe mode. A number of you have already locked in your answers, so let's close our poll. Click, and it's a rainbow. It's very pretty, but we did not get a majority on this one. This is one of the challenges with this process of removing malware is there really is a structure where you should do one thing first, one thing second, one thing third, and go through the entire list. And CompTIA used to collapse this into a 7-piece list. Now it's a 10-piece, but they didn't add anything. They just broke a few things out to make sure that you understood that was a separate step. The mitigation process, they had 3 things that were kind of stuck together. They pulled those apart. So now we have a different process, but the steps are still the same. You can see that 42% say to enable system restore. We've got 21% that said to update antivirus software. Another 21% said to launch safe mode. So those together are exactly the same as the first answer we got. Everything drops off to single digits after that. 9% said schedule scans and run updates, and 7% said re-image the system. Well, for those of you that were here, I think this is one from last month. So this might be one that some of you remember. The answer was the one the plurality of you got, although not a majority. It was still pretty close at 42%. Say, enable system restore. That was the answer that we were looking for. Now, why, if this is a 10-step process, why is enable system restore the 9th of the 10 process? That's really what we were asking with this question. Well, whenever you start looking at removing malware from a system, this is usually something you don't normally do in a corporate environment, obviously. With a corporate environment, you can't ever 100% guarantee that malware was removed from a system. You can use multiple malware removal tools. You could manually go in and delete files, but you'll never know if you really got it all. For that reason, most organizations don't mess around with removing malware. They completely delete everything on the system and simply restore from a known good backup or restore from an image. That is the common best practice for practically everywhere you will go. But occasionally, someone might have an extremely important bit of data on that system, and you need to get that data off of the system, get it off of the system cleanly so that you can then delete everything on the computer and load it from a known good setup. That's probably the best practice for using this 10-step malware removal process. Earlier on in the process, one of the things you do is you disable system restore. As you probably are aware, when malware gets on your system, it gets everywhere. It tries to embed itself into every aspect of that operating system. One of the things that's very common for malware to do is not only to infect your currently running operating system, but it also infects all of the restore points that you have created through the last number of months or years, depending on how much you keep for restore points on your system. That means that you could try to be crafty and think, oh, I just got malware. Let me go back to a previous date and restore from that restore point. I'll get rid of the malware. Oh no, the malware authors are already onto you. When you restore from that previous restore point, it's already infected with the same malware. So that's why we always say before you even start this process, you disable system restore. Well, if you're disabling it at the beginning of the process, you need to enable it once you're finishing up with the process. So enabling system restore is going to be an important part of that. This is taking advantage of those restore points that you've been making this whole time. And of course, this is where you would go inside of your system properties to be able to specify where those restore points are. You can create a restore point right now, and you click that option, and you get the option to either turn on or disable system protection. That's the term used internally, is system restore and system protection. They're used interchangeably. I like how it says turn on system protection. It doesn't say turn off. It says disable. So it doesn't say enable system protection. I don't know. Were two people working on that one? Maybe they wanted to be really sure you didn't mix those up. That probably makes more sense. System restore is what you do just before talking to the end user about maybe what they should do next time before they manage to infect themselves in the details of this. So enabling system restore is the answer we were looking for. 42% of you got that one absolutely right. It looks like you're able to get in and answer questions just fine. So why don't we now move on to some new questions? The new questions, as many of you know, I like to start the new questions with not a normal Q&A, not a normal multiple choice question. I prefer doing a question that is not multiple choice. CompTIA calls this a performance-based question. And performance-based questions are questions that, well, simply are not multiple choice. They're questions that are anything but multiple choice. So they could be fill in the blank. You could put things in a particular order. There might be a matching question. It might be a drag and drop question. A lot of people are focused on this is only going to put you at a command prompt and you have to do things at a command prompt, or it's only going to do something on the screen that you have to do interactively. Well, they certainly could be those types of questions, but they could also be matching questions and fill in the blank and those types as well. So be prepared for anything. From my perspective, it makes it very difficult to give you practical examples of these questions because, as you might imagine, what format is a question if it's not multiple choice? Well, it could be a million different types of questions. It's hard to get down to that level specifically to be able to do that. So I try to give you different types of questions, and we try them out. As I often tell you before we get into this question, as I often say in these study groups, if you know the exam objectives, doesn't matter how they ask the question, you'll know the answer. So don't worry so much about how the questions are being posed. Worry more about, do I know the exam objectives? And then everything else sort of takes care of itself. Here is our performance-based question of the month. This is very similar to the performance-based question we did last week with Linux. And everybody liked that one so much, I thought we would do one more round of this before moving on. This is a question where I would like you to answer some questions for me. That's an odd question. The question is you answering more questions. So from the Linux command line, I want you to answer these 4 questions. The first question is, what is the name of the current directory? Now, what I'm looking for is you to give me the command that would answer that question. I'm not looking for the name of the current directory. I'm asking you to tell me what command would you use to determine what the name of the current directory is. Then we might want to move on to the second question, which is, what files are located in the current directory? Those are 2 different questions with 2 different answers. So see if you know what those happen to be. The third is, what available options are associated with that previous command? So by options, I mean there are a lot of things you can type in at the command prompt. What are the different options available to you? There should be a certain thing you can type in to know, how do I even use this command? And then lastly, what is the current CPU utilization on the system? As with many things Linux-ish, you will find that there are many different ways to answer some of these questions. What I am looking for is the answer that would be associated with the Linux commands that are listed in the official CompTIA exam objectives. So there is a little bit of a scope here, but to be fair, this is a study group, and if you got it right, you got it right. So from my perspective, if you know Linux so well that you can give me 2 or 3 different ways to do the same thing, I think you're doing okay with your studies. I think you'll be all right with Linux. All you have to know is one of them, though, thankfully. All I have to know is one of them. So I manage my own Linux servers, of course. If you're on ProfessorMesser.com right now, you're on a Linux server. There's a Linux database. There is a Linux web server. There are Linux processes going on behind the scenes. I do tons of scripting. I do tons of backups. There's a lot that I do on my system to keep things running. So I have to manage Windows. I have to manage Linux. I have to manage macOS. Very similar to the task that you will probably be faced with if you were to be a system administrator at practically any organization. Practically everybody has Windows. Practically everybody has Linux. Practically everybody has macOS. This is no longer becoming something where we're fighting over what the best is. We're now fighting just to keep up with what all three of those operating systems are doing and more. We didn't even talk about Android or iOS or iPad OS or Google or any of the other operating systems out there. We're really just talking about those big three on the desktop and servers. That's one of the good things. And one of the nice parts about that, of course, is that if you're somebody who's been working with desktops and servers, or maybe you're running Linux at home, well, it's the same Linux you're running in running in your organization. It's the same Linux you're running in the enterprise. It's the same Linux the biggest companies in the world are using. What an opportunity to become familiar with a technology that you can run at home that could then effectively help you in your career. So something useful to know. The more you know about different operating systems, the better off you are going to be. So let's step through all four of these questions, and let's see if you chose the same thing I chose to be able to do this. So I have to be able to do this. The first question is, what's the name of the current directory? Well, why don't I use Linux to do this? This is an old system I set up a long time ago. It's running Fedora. It's running an outdated version of Fedora, quite honestly. I need to do an update of this. But of course, as soon as I powered it up just prior to the study group, would not be the time to do an update. Just a little bit of change control for you. This is not the time to make a change or an update to an operating system. So the question is, what's the name of the current directory? So here we are at a command prompt on a Linux machine. If you wanted to know the current directory, you would use the print working directory command, pwd. Pwd just shows you the current directory. That's all it is. That's all it does. Very simple command. Sometimes it's all you need. You can use this in a script and then take the information that you receive from that to be able to do other things in the script or interactively on the screen, just as I did here. I typed in pwd, hit enter, and it said that I am currently in the /home/Professor Messer directory. That's it. There are other things we could have typed in that would have given us a similar answer, but that is the answer that I was looking for in that first one. If you came up with something else and it still provided you with the current directory, I say you give yourself points on that. We're going to keep going with that one, but that is a command that is directly listed in the official CompTIA exam objectives. That pwd command useful not only in Linux, it works as well in Windows / the DOS / command prompt inside of a Windows environment. Works the same way in macOS as well. So you get a few options there. pwd, it's a good command to know. Next on our list was a question that asked, what files are located in the current directory? I guess what other operating system, file system objects, if you want to be a Linux person, are located in the current directory? Well, one of the ways that you could do that is to have a listing of those with the ls command. ls shows you the files and directories that are currently listed in the current working directory. And you can see here, most of what I have in that current working directory are a bunch of apparently folders because they are color-coded on my screen. The files, and there's only one file in that directory, one file in that directory, it's firefox_wallpaper.png, which is a default that comes with the distribution. So that is what we see in that view. But you know, there are other options for ls. If I could only remember what those options were. This is a good reason why the third question on our list is, what available options are associated with the previous command? So this is one where I'd like to get some documentation of the ls command. Do we go to Google and type in, show me documentation for the ls command? Do we find a manual somewhere? Do we buy a book about Linux? Of course not. We use the online manual for Linux, which is called, oddly enough, man, buddy, pal, it's man. The command you'd like to use, it stands for manual. And if you specify the command that you would like the manual for, in this case, the ls command, I type in man ls, And it brings me up the documentation, ls, the user command. The name is ls, list directory contents. Here is the synopsis, which shows the ls command. You can put in any options you would like, and you can specify a file name if you would like. It lists information about the files, the current directory by default. Sort entries alphabetically if none of the -CFTUVSUX nor --sort is specified. So you can see there's a lot to go through. You can use the arrow keys to move through this. You can use the space key to go a screen at a time. You can use page up and page down. And it tells you at the bottom, you can press H for more help or Q to quit. So if you wanted to go through this list and you maybe wanted a long listing format, they say you could use -L for a long listing format. Let's try that, shall we? A long listing format. So let's do a ls-L. And what a different view. Up here, we just did ls, and it showed everything sort of on a couple of lines. The long listing format with the -L shows me who owns the file, what group the file is in. In this case, the owner and the group is identical. It's called Professor Messer. We get information about the rights and permissions associated with the owner, with the group, and with everyone else. We talk a little bit about that in our core 2. The size of that particular file or folder. If it's a folder, it has a 0 size. If it's a file like the Firefox wallpaper, it's 2,355 bytes in length. We got times and dates associated with those documents and when they were last updated. And then the name of the file or the name of the file system object is listed on the right side. A much bigger view, but if you're trying to troubleshoot something, in fact, we may even want to make this screen a little bit bigger. One nice thing about running in a graphical terminals, we can expand things out a bit. This gives us a lot more information for troubleshooting, a lot more information we would use for doing administration. So taking advantage of the man command to be able to find other features that we might be able to use can be extremely helpful, especially if somebody tells you, type in ls-la space, and you're thinking, wait, what was that? What does that do? Does it delete anything? Does it modify anything? I don't want to run a command where I'm going to delete anything. We can use the man command to determine what they were asking me to do, because I forget what these different options are all the time. There are way too many options for some of these that you really do need something to prompt you, to remind you what these are. In fact, I will often create in my scripts, I often write out the full name of the thing that I'm trying to do. For example, if I go back to the manual, if you wanted to create a command that had, maybe in this list, let me find a good one here. The L was pretty good, but let's say that you wanted to list it in a different way. You wanted, for example, it to be have print entry names without any quotes. You can do that. Maybe you wanted to change how that shows up as part of your script. Now you could do that by using the -N and just use that ls-N. I don't know that it would change anything with our current configuration. But the part that I think really helps when we start breaking this out and figuring out the details of this is what I type into my script is --literal. I don't use the abbreviation. I don't use the -N. Not because it's any better or worse. In fact, you could say it's worse. There's much more space you'd have to use to store this script if we're writing out all of the options. The benefit, though, is when we go back to look at our script a month later, a year later, now we can see the actual commands that are listed there. Oh, it's literal. That's the one that prints the names without doing the escape commands. That's what we're doing. So that's why man can be pretty helpful. And it's a good idea to maybe compare some of these and use the longer version of it instead of the shorter version. That might help you as well if you're trying to get through the process of understanding what the different options might be. So instead of -R for recursive, use --recursive. Let's see if that will work. So if we do a ls-R, it's going to recurse through all of the directories to show me all the files that may be in all of them. So it lists out everything that we have there. Or we could run the same command with --recursive. It's exactly the same thing. A lot more typing, especially when you're at the command prompt, but it's the same command. When I hit enter, look, it just gave me the same output when I used --recursive on that view. So just another way that you can use that man command to help you and then make it a little bit easier down the road for other things you might be doing. Okay, of the 4 questions we have, we've covered 3 of them. We now know the name of the current directory, the files in the current directory, and what options are associated with that previous ls command. Lastly, we're going to go on a little bit of departure where I want to know what is the current CPU utilization on the system? There are lots of ways to do this at the command prompt. A lot of different commands, but there's only one that is listed in the CompTIA exam objectives, or at least one that I can think of offhand that I know will give this, and I can't think of any others that would off the top of this. But the command we're looking for, speaking of off the top, I want to use the command, if we clear this, I want to use the command top, T-O-P. The top command shows me the top services running on this system. It's a full screen view that gives me an idea of how long we've been up and running. The load average, loads are based on a percentage. So I think a 1 is probably well above what we want to do. It's probably what most people shoot for, and it can go even higher than that. We've got the number of tasks running. There are 220 total tasks running. Think of this as the task manager for Windows. That's what we have in Linux, the top command. Very similar in what they are providing to you. Obviously, the information is different. The operating systems, I realize, are different operating systems. I don't need your emails about that one. But it does show us, notice, the CPU utilization. We can see user CPU, system CPU, and then idle. ID is idle. So 93.2%, 94% idle. It's just sitting there every second and going through this. We can also hit a button on our screen. I use the down arrow, and it will be able to give you updates faster than 1 second. We can also go to the man top, and you get a lot of different options that are available in here. Different information we will show in the command, a lot of different capabilities. In fact, there are a lot of great third-party top-like commands out there that give you even more customization. You got to love Linux for that, right? There's always a way to customize and do different things. When we are looking at this, we can even page through these. I can page down through all of the 223 total processes that are going on. You can sort by different columns. You get the idea. This is how you can see not just CPU utilization that is currently in use, but also a breakdown of every single process that's running and manage the process all from this one screen. And when you're done, you hit the Q button, Q, and you can't really see it because my big head's in the way. But now, there we go. Now we're back at the command prompt. So that is how easy it is to find information in Linux, to bring up that task list with the top command. And as I mentioned, we can man top, and we can see all of the different top options and things you can do with it. As with most Linux commands like this, there are like a billion different options available, which is quite a few if you were to count them. That's a lot to remember, and you can see now why this top command is so valuable if you're trying to find that one thing. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know. You should instead be trying to figure out, I will find it, and the man command will help you find exactly that. So those are the commands that we were looking for this month performance-based question. The name of the current directory we can find with the pwd command. The files in the current directory can be identified using the ls command. The available options associated with that previous command would be found with the man command for ls specifically. And then we've got the current CPU utilization on the system, the top command. If you are someone who is looking for more information on Linux, trying to understand more about the things that we want to be able to do, those commands are available on the official CompTIA exam objectives. If you have not seen the official objectives, they are available. Link to go over to them is available at professormesser.com/objectives. Be a good thing to consider if you have not picked those up already. Let's now, I think we did pretty well on our performance-based question. I briefly glimpsed through a lot of the answers that you guys had submitted into the list, and you did a great job. There are a lot of great answers in this list. Hopefully, that's given you some good Linux command line practice. And if you don't have a Linux, maybe you're a Windows user and you're thinking, how am I ever going to study for Linux? Make sure you go out and download a hypervisor of some kind. Download I've got a few that I run on my system, but go download some that might be specific to yours. I use VirtualBox a lot. It's free. It runs on every platform. So if you're running Windows or macOS or Linux, just run VirtualBox. It's a great one to use. Find any available Linux distribution you happen to have out there. load up anything you can find. Some of the most, it really doesn't matter. Just get anything running Linux, load it up as a separate virtual machine in your hypervisor, and then you sort of learned two things in one day. You learned about running VMs on your desktop, and you also learned about starting up and installing Linux. Maybe you were doing three things, because then you can log in and run things at the Linux command line. That's a great way to do it, by the way. That way you're in a virtual machine. You can't break anything in the outside world that way, which is perfect for me. I can hardly ever break anything from my Linux distribution. Let's now move on to more questions. We're going to go back to a question, to our multiple choice questions. If you do have questions about virtual machines or things you can do with it, you are more than welcome to leave us a question for the second hour at professormesser.com/QA. I would love to answer those. We can even step through the process of creating a virtualized system if you would like, and how you can load up VirtualBox, start it up, download a Linux. Maybe we'll do that real quick in our after show. If you're interested in that, let me know. We can certainly go through that process. Let's do another question, though. We're going to switch back to our multiple choice questions. This multiple choice question asks, a user logs into their Windows workstation in the morning and finds they can access various file servers and printers throughout the day without re-entering credentials. Which of the following technologies provides this single sign-on capability? Would that be TACACS Plus, Smart Cards, Kerberos, VPN Concentrator, or Radius? One of these would be the best answer to give. If you think you know the answer, go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Please do not put answers into the chat room. Please do not put any hints into the chat room. Instead, you want to follow those links that are right there to be able to answer this particular question. The question again asks, the user logs into their Windows workstation in the morning and finds they can access various file servers and printers throughout the day without re-entering credentials. Which of the following technologies provides this single sign-on functionality? Is it TACACS Plus, Smart Cards, Kerberos, VPN Concentrator, or Radius? I see everybody submitting their answers. It's going in now. No Googling. No Googles. No Googling. You don't have Google during the exam anyway. So take it as if you are sitting in the room. You're trying to figure out the details. In fact, one or more of these answers here might be things you've not seen before. Well, that's a normal exam. I think you still have to find your way through this to be able to figure out what the answer happens to be. So submit your answer at any time. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your answers. Let's see how you did with this one. A user logs into their Windows workstation in the morning and finds they can access various file servers and printers throughout the day without re-entering credentials. Which of the following technologies provides the single sign-on functionality? Is it TACACS Plus, Smart Cards, Kerberos, VPN Concentrator, or Radius? These are wicked Smart Cards. We're going to close our poll and see the answer. Well, a little bit of a rainbow. We came pretty close to a majority. I think we can call it 49% of you, not a technical majority. We're giving you the point. Said Kerberos, and 49% said Kerberos. 26% of you, over a quarter of you, said Radius. 18% said TACACS Plus. 5% said Wicked Smart Cards, and then 2% of you said VPN Concentrator. So 49% is a pretty big number, and that is the number that we were looking for. Kerberos for this one. Can't really see it because I'm in the way there. 49% said Kerberos. Why would Kerberos be the answer over TACACS Plus or over Radius? In fact, you may have been thinking in your mind, this is authentication. So there would be an authentication protocol we would use. And in our list, TACACS Plus is an authentication protocol. Kerberos is an authentication protocol. Radius is an authentication protocol. Smart cards are a authentication factor. They're a way that you could add an additional form of authentication. So you could take your smart card, plug it into a system, and that will serve as one type of authentication. You don't usually just use a smart card. It's usually in conjunction with a PIN or a password or another type of authentication so that you would have multiple factors of authentication or multi-factor authentication, MFA. There's also VPN Concentrator in this list. A VPN concentrator is something we might be authenticating to, but it would not be responsible for the single sign-on functionality. That's not what VPN concentrators do. They don't store anything about your authentication. They don't provide your authentication credentials to anyone else except for that initial logging in or authentication to the concentrator. So that means we have really three answers to pull from: TACACS Plus, Kerberos, and Radius. 49% of you said Kerberos, and that is the answer that we were looking for. Kerberos is the protocol used behind the scenes by Windows and other technologies. This is a protocol that's been around for a very long time and used in many different places, but I guess it was more popularized, if you will, by Windows. This means that Kerberos may in fact be the most popular authentication protocol running in the world, I guess if you wanted to break it down that way. It uses a series of cryptographic functions to be able to log in, and when you log in, the login server gives you a cryptographic ticket, a ticket that has been signed by the main authentication service. And it gives you that ticket and says, this ticket is good for 24 hours. If you need to access any other system, just show them this ticket. They'll let you in. That's effectively what Kerberos is. Kerberos is a golden ticket that gets you in through any doorway. And you don't have to even say anything. You just say, ticket. There it is. Right there. There's my ticket. That's it. And you're good. That's why if you're someone who is working in an environment like Windows, you'll notice you log in at the beginning of the day, and it just is able to do that. It's just able to remember that. It's not really remembering anything. You have been given a cryptographic ticket, and that ticket is the one that you can then present as behind the scenes as you are visiting other devices. So that's why in this particular case, that's exactly the protocol that we're using is Kerberos. It's really in a very effective way to do this. For those of you in the chat room, like Spectrum 10, who says, is this pre-recorded live or really live? It must be pre-recorded. That's all I can really tell you. Must be what that is. I just knew that you were going to ask that at this time. That's how that worked. See how that worked? Kerberos, fantastic protocol. It's one of the reasons we run it in Windows. And it's one of the reasons it's the answer to this question. But why is it not the others in this list? You're welcome. You're welcome, Spectrum. More than happy to do it. Why would it not be TACACS? Why would it not be Radius? Those are perfectly good authentication protocols. They are used for many different authentication processes. If you're someone who is running a lot of Cisco equipment in your environment, I would bet the Cisco folks are probably using TACACS to some degree to provide access for the administrative access to those. One of the things we always worry about on the networking side and on the security side is if we integrate our Cisco equipment into Kerberos, we're now relying on Kerberos to be there if we need to get into our switches, routers, and other devices. That probably is not the position you want to be in. What if Kerberos breaks? What if you lose connectivity to the Windows network? Well, then that would limit your access to your switches and routers. Bad idea. So having your own authentication system is very often what people will do, and they might use TACACS Plus for that because the Cisco equipment just knows TACACS Plus. It's been using TACACS Plus for so long that it's very similar. But many of your switches, routers, and other infrastructure devices can also authenticate through LDAP, through Kerberos, through other methods as well. You would need to check that device to see what type of authentication it can support. However, TACACS Plus doesn't have a single sign-on functionality. It doesn't give you a ticket to take along with you to show for later. It just allows you in. And that's it. It's sort of a one-time deal. If you connect to a switch, it may ask you for your TACACS credentials. You type in those credentials, you do your work, you sign out. Then you connect to another switch, and it says, well, give me your credentials again. Oh, no single sign-on. Let me type my credentials in again. Boom. Now we can get into that switch interactively. We log out of that switch. We go to a third switch. Guess what happens? That's right. We have to type in our credentials again because TACACS Plus by itself has no single sign-on functionality. Same thing for Radius, which is probably one of the most open third-party type authentication methods you get. If you're running, for example, you want to run Radius at home, load up Open Radius or a number of the other open source Radius servers that you can use. It's a very easy way, and a lot of systems support Radius. Very simple to implement. It's found almost everywhere in almost every operating system. It's a very common way to provide authentication. But again, no single sign-on. and that's why it's not the answer here. No SSO. The only option here that gave us any single sign-on is indeed Kerberos. 49% of you chose that one. 49% of you got that one absolutely correct. That is exactly what we were looking for to answer that very specific authentication question. Okay, let's do another question. I'm talking a lot on this one. I apologize, but hopefully we'll get through more of these to be able to work through this piece of it. Let's see the next question on our list, and it is, a technician wants to see if a slow browser is caused by a specific website's heavy use of resources. Which tools should they use to view real-time CPU and RAM usage for each Windows process? Now, if you were listening earlier, you might have been able to answer this one. Your possible answers are System Configuration, Device Manager, Event Viewer, Disk Management, and Task Manager. You got a few to choose from in this list. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to follow the link on your screen and go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Maybe you know what it is. A lot of people locking in their answer pretty quick, which I never know if we're all getting it right or if we're all getting it wrong. I'm never quite sure exactly which way we would go with that. So in this case, maybe you do know what these are. Now, each one of the answers for this one, these are all real things. I didn't make any of these up. These are all real utilities in your Windows machine. So if you are someone who is really going through the process of kind of working through Windows and understanding the requirements needed from the official CompTIA exam objectives, you should know all of these answers. If there's an answer here you don't recognize, make a note. So make sure that you see what the different options are to be able to do that. So have a look at the different options that are on your screen, see which one fits the best. And if you don't recognize the option, make a note so that you can go do some study on that later, because any of these might come up on your exam. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a technician wants to see if a slow browser is caused by a specific website's heavy use of resources. Which tools should they use to view real-time CPU and RAM usage for each Windows process? Would it be System Configuration, Device Manager, Event Viewer, Disk Management, or Task Manager? Let's stop our poll and see what you chose. Big numbers now. We got 82% of you that say the answer is Task Manager. But as you can see, we got double digits on 10% said Event Viewer is what we were looking for. 6% said Device Manager, and then it drops down to 1% for Disk Management, and this makes me sad, 0% for System Configuration. So in this case, a huge number, I would say a vast majority of you, 82%, say the answer is Task Manager. But is it really? Is it really? Let's show the correct answer. Yeah, it really is. Of course it is. That is exactly what we use. As I mentioned earlier with Linux, we were looking at the top command to be able to see the top usage on a system. And I mentioned there that this is very similar to the Task Manager that you might have on the Windows side. So that was my little precursor to this question, giving you a little insight of what you might run into. Task Manager, a great tool, because whenever you get that ticket that says, my computer is slow, they're not telling you why it's slow. They're not telling you why they think it's slow. They're not telling you if there's any messages popping up on the screen. They're not saying when I run a certain application, it's slow. They're just saying the system is slow, or even better, the network is slow. That doesn't help me. You're not giving me anything in this view. And unfortunately, that's a very common ticket. My system is slow. All right, well, now we have to start troubleshooting this. And ideally, of course, we would talk to the user, but they're never at their desk. They're never picking up the phone. They don't respond to emails. So now it's up to us to figure this out. Now, I will also, let me give you a little bit of career advice when we are talking about this. And I see this all the time, is that people on the internet, I say people on the internet sort of as a very broad group, but it may just be a couple people on the internet, say, I hate it when people put these tickets in here. All they put in the ticket is that it's slow. They never give me anything. Why aren't they telling me about it? They're seeing it on the screen. Why don't they put information in the ticket? And they get really worked up about the fact that the end users are not providing any information that will help with the ticket. And they take it negatively. I say this is a very positive thing. I think it's a great thing when this happens. First, it's not the user's responsibility to be a technical person, to be technically knowledgeable in the details of how Windows operates. Most of the time, they're running an Outlook front end. They're running Microsoft Word. They're running a spreadsheet. They're in a browser. They have no idea about Event Viewer or Task Manager or system configuration, and you don't want them to, because that's your job. You're getting paid to fix these. This is great. This means you will always have a job. See how this is a positive thing? So don't ever get frustrated at the fact that people aren't giving you enough information. Instead, you should be embracing that. You should thank them. Thank you. Thank you for not saying anything more than it's slow, because I got you from here, because you know how to fix this problem. That's the idea. And you would use Task Manager. Task Manager gives you a list of CPU utilization, the memory utilization, the disk utilization, and the network utilization, and more, all based on this by process inside of Windows. So look, you could see, for example, Google Chrome. Look how much memory Google Chrome is using. So I really just started up this Task Manager screenshot. I just started Windows and started Google Chrome, and I loaded up a couple of websites. We're already using 4 gig of memory just for Chrome. Forget Windows. Windows is nothing. Windows is lightweight compared to Chrome. Chrome shows you everything. We were talking about this in the chat earlier. So Chrome's really using resources on here, which is, to be fair, not unusual for a browser. It's not hard to get any browser to start working hard on a lot of websites you would go to. I think I may have loaded 3 or 4 websites here. But when you start loading up a website with a lot of interactive capabilities, there's a streaming video happening right now. It's coming in at 4K, so there's more that has to be decoded as it's coming in. It's being presented to a 4K screen. There's a lot that can cause those numbers to go higher and higher and higher. And Task Manager is a great way to get real-time view of what's going on. And that is what can really help. If somebody says it's slow and you pop this view up and it says, well, there's only 9% CPU, I don't think our problem is a CPU issue. We aren't spending so many cycles on some application that has gone rogue and is taking up all the resources of your processor. But we might have a problem with memory because it's at 92%. Well, which app is using all the memory? You can sort by that column and see exactly what processes and what tasks are there causing or using the most numbers of those resources. And there's other windows you can go to as well. You can break out the network side. They've got all these tabs at the top that say performance. You can get a nice 60-day view of how things have been performing. This is really a real-time view to really help you. And then you can try different things on the computer and see if that changes what's happening in Task Manager. Might be something you might want to consider. So this is a great tool. It's one that probably you hit first before you even do anything on the system. What's happening right now? Before we make a change, before we reboot, before we do anything, let's check Task Manager real quick and just get an idea of what's happening right now. That might be enough to point you in a direction. If I got to this machine, you went to this machine, somebody said it's slow, what's the first thing you would do? You would close Google Chrome. Maybe you look at Google Chrome. Do they have 600 tabs open? That might be part of the problem. Or maybe they have 1 tab open and it's at 4 gig. Maybe it's a memory leak. Not an unusual thing. So let's, boom, click the button. Boom, there it goes. Now we no longer have to deal with that problem. We freed up 4 gig of memory. Let's launch Chrome again. Let's go exactly to the site we were on before. Does it go up to 4 gig again? Or are we starting to slowly eat away at the memory over time? Maybe it takes an entire day. So our answer to the person would be either let's let the application developer know that we're getting a memory problem, but whenever this happens again, just close out Chrome, launch it again, and you'll be in better shape this time. All because we were able to look at Task Manager. That's exactly where we should have gone for this particular issue. And 82% of you said, yep, I agree with you. Event Viewer is another great place to go, but Event Viewer is more of a log repository inside of Windows. Why it doesn't have log in the name, I don't know. It has events in the name. I guess events are better, aren't they? Events are better things than logs. It's the same thing in Windows. In Windows, your events are many and varied. Event Viewer is full. If you were to look at your Event Viewer right now, probably has thousands and thousands and thousands of events inside of it. And that's good. That's exactly what we want, because when you are troubleshooting, we want to be able to go through those logs and see exactly what's going on with different processes, different services, different authentications. Everything that happens in your computer is stored in that Event Viewer. So it seems a bit daunting when you first start Event Viewer because there is so much in these logs. And to be fair, most of what's written in these logs, I know it's in English, but it sure looks like a different language. There's a lot to pour through, and there's no way you're going to understand every line of everything that's put into Event Viewer, because developers are the ones determining what gets posted in Event Viewer. So already we got a problem with that. But you can, of course, use that information to sort through where problems might be, and it will tell you if it does run into a problem. You can filter out by those things. It is a great way to start troubleshooting. And in fact, it's probably one of the very common ways that people don't troubleshoot. I say don't troubleshoot. They don't. They sort of miss the log part. I've had people come to me and say, well, the service is not starting when the computer starts up. Oh, what does Event Viewer show you? What's that? Event Viewer. What, you went through the logs in Event Viewer, you filtered out for that specific service. What was the error message that it gave when that service failed? Oh, I didn't look at the logs. Thank you. That's exactly where we're going then. That's where we will focus. And we start building out our documentation from there. Event Viewer is a great option. The more you know about Event Viewer, the easier and the faster your troubleshooting is going to go. Device Manager, a similar type app in that it's got a lot of information inside of it to figure out. It's also a very key part of making the hardware on your system work properly with the operating system software. This is effectively your device drivers are inside of Device Manager. This can also give you messages when a device driver is not starting, a device configuration, hardware of your system. And if you need to disable or restart a piece of hardware, you can often do it directly from Device Manager. It's a great way to access the operating system configuration for all of the hardware in your system, whether it's video, storage drives, a mouse, a keyboard, a printer. It's all inside of Device Manager. If your operating system is touching hardware, there needs to be a device driver inside of Device Manager. 1% of you said disk management, and just like the name implies, this is where you might look at disk configurations, what partitions are on a particular storage drive, what type of configurations are associated with those partitions, what type of file systems are we using on those partitions, is there any free space available on a particular storage drive, can we create a new partition, can we delete a partition? All that can be done inside of disk management. That's a very dangerous utility. I told you can go into Event Viewer right now and sift through Event Viewer to your heart's content. That is not what you should be doing with disk management. With disk management, you can look, but do not touch. Do not make changes in disk management, because you could very, very, very easily delete all of your data. That's all I'm saying. Probably not a place where you want to be. In fact, if you are planning to make any significant changes to disk management, I would highly recommend you get a backup. Get a backup, and then you're covered. That way, if something does go awry, we can restore it back. Another good thing to think about. And lastly, system configuration, which gives us an overview of the configuration of your system. Literally does that. System configuration, not the option here. It wouldn't show us real-time usage of each Windows process. It does show us a lot of interesting things about the configuration of our system, however. If you're trying to figure out what version of BIOS am I running, how much memory is in this computer, what type of video settings do I have, it's inside of system configuration. It will tell you. You can't make any changes in there, but it will tell you a lot about that computer. If you're sitting down at a computer for the first time to do troubleshooting, you might want to head over to system configuration just to see what you're working with here. What version of Windows is running? How much memory is inside of this? How much storage drives do I have? It's a great place to get it all in one place inside of system configuration. The answer here, obviously, Task Manager. 82% of you got that one right, and 82% of you are absolutely correct. I'm at the top of the hour already. This can't be. We're going to do more questions, though. We're going to go into overtime because I've just been talking too much on this one. but we're going to do a couple more questions before we are done. Just hang in there with me. We'll get through all of them. Also remind you, of course, as you are looking through all of these different courses and all of the things that we are doing, we have a lot of different options for you for keeping track of what you have learned. And of course, we have our entirely absolutely free videos on our website. That's a great place to go to be able to see videos and the entire course that we have available. We don't store anything behind a paywall. There's nothing that has been removed from these videos. We cover every topic from every single listing in the official CompTIA exam objectives. You will not find a more comprehensive training course anywhere, I guarantee you. For some reason, other training courses just leave things off, and I don't know why they do that when we have been given a very specific list of things that we know could appear on your exam. We cover every single one of those, and you might go through every single video that we have, 137 videos. Was it really? Gosh, it only seemed like 136 when I did it. 19 hours of content. There's a lot in here. So one of the things I did was take all of the text, all of the graphics, all of the important tables, and I put them into a document. These are my course notes. The course notes are available in a printed book form, like the one that we see here. It's a perfect bound, like a softcover book might be, of a view of this, or have the digital version that you were seeing in front of you. The digital version that we have listed here are available, and you can see tables are in here, all of the text, the screenshots that help give a little bit of context, the information that's important for you to know for your exam is in this document. Now, of course, it doesn't replace you watching the videos, doesn't replace you reading a good book or doing hands-on or doing practice exams, but it is a great consolidated view of everything that we include in all of our videos, and it is formatted and arranged in the same structure as our actual training course, which makes it easy to find things when you're watching the videos and easy to find things after the fact. If you'd like more information on that, we have both our Core 1 and our Core 2 course notes available. If I can get them up here, there we go. We got everything on the screen. There we go. Core 1 and Core 2. If you get them both at the same time, there's a little bit of a cost break. So you might want to consider that if you're looking at those. And there's a lot more on our website too. You can find all of this available at professormesser.com/1202 notes. Let's shift gears back to more questions since I talk so much. Blah, 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 blah. Let's do more questions. There's got to be more here to do, right? Next on our list, a question that asks, a user's browsing a website and notices clicking a button triggers a dynamic menu without reloading the page. Which scripting language is most likely responsible for providing this type of browser interactivity? Would it be Python, JavaScript, PowerShell, VBScript, or Shell script? Here they are. Those are your options. All of them great scripting languages, but which one applies here? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. Head over there, professormesser.com/QA, to be able to lock in the answer for this question. This might be a good one for you if you're someone who's been working in a browser and wondering, how does it do all of that? Well, maybe we'll find out right now. A lot of these options in here, every single one of the options in here comes directly from the official CompTIA exam objectives. So again, if you don't recognize one of these or you're not sure how you would use that particular scripting language, make sure you go check out our video. I'll show you which video here in just a moment when we look at the answer. I think this might be a good one to break through, have some familiarity with. This might be one you're doing some troubleshooting with. Now, of course, on the information technology side, we're not developers. We don't do any programming. We do some scripting. That is not the same thing as programming. Scripting is, I guess you could say it's an adjunct. It's a derivative. It's a type of programming, I guess. That's kind of stretching the word programming, I think. I don't think scripting really is programming. I know that technically it fits into that category. I don't think it really is. I think programming is a completely different thing, at least in my mind. It is a much broader, more detailed type thing that really you would spend your entire career on. That's why computer science over on the programming side, information technology over on the operations side. It's kind of, it's a broad separation. There's a very little small overlap right in the middle, but really not much. That's pretty close to the way things work in the world. We've often wanted to kind of crush those things together. What if we got programmers that knew the operation side of things? Turns out none exist. There's no such thing in the world. Took us years to figure that out. That's the way it goes. Let's see how you did with this one. A user's browsing a website and notices clicking a button triggers a dynamic menu without reloading the page. Which scripting language is most likely responsible for providing this type of browser interactivity? Would it be Python, JavaScript, PowerShell, VBScript, or Shell script? Let's close our poll, and we can see that our answer, by far, 81% of you say the answer is none of the above. No, you said the answer is JavaScript. That's what you chose, JavaScript. And that 81%. 9% said PowerShell. We've got about the same number, 7%, that said the answer is VBScript. And then, of course, we have a lot of folks that have decided to choose Python. Yeah, that's right, 1%. Same thing for Shell script, only 1%. Not a lot of folks at all. Not really what's happening there. So we have a lot of options here, and really almost any one of these scripting languages could potentially be used to provide some interactivity on a website, but that wasn't the question. The question was, which is most likely responsible for doing this? That's what we are looking for to be able to break this out. And one of these is going to be the answer that we need. Let's see. The 81% is pretty strong. In fact, that is the number that we were looking for. It is indeed JavaScript. This is from my video 4.8 under scripting languages, where we talk about JavaScript and being able to work through this. Normally, we would see those scripts with a JS file extension, just to be able to tell you that, yes, that's a JavaScript file. It doesn't have to have that extension, but it's one that can certainly work there. And if you're working in a browser, if you need to do something interactive, if you're clicking around the screen and things are happening, if you're playing a game in a browser and it's reacting to you as you click through there, well, that is JavaScript that's probably doing that. There's a lot of other types of things you can do there, but one of the things that always gets people messed up is in the industry, we have JavaScript, which is a scripting language inside of a browser, but then you also have Java, which that's the same name. It must be the same thing. Nope. No, that's not the same thing. In fact, they are two completely different things created by two completely different entities providing two completely different functions. Java is a full-blown programming language. Java's for the computer science people. JavaScript for the information technology people. There you go. We could separate them out that way. So when you hear Java, in fact, I notice some people will say Java when they mean JavaScript. And if you say, wait, do you mean Java? Because if you mean Java, we need to do something else. But if you really mean JavaScript, then those are all completely different scenarios. So make sure you know the difference if you're going through that. So that is the answer that we were looking for in this case. JavaScript, 81% of you got that one absolutely correct. That is exactly what we were wanting to see. I know we're past the top of the hour. I told you we would do a couple more questions. Let's do another question, shall we? I think this might be a good time to fit one more in before we are done today. Be kind of fine. Be able to work through that. This question, though, is not one that I wrote specifically for this study group, although we've not done this question on a study group before. This is a question that is listed in my official, my 220-1202, my Core 2 practice exams book. One of the things I found when I started going around the internet looking at practice exams that were out there is there wasn't a lot of real high quality stuff out there. I think that may be putting it a bit mildly. There's some really bad practice exams on the internet that I ran into. They're not written in the same style as the actual exam. Many of these practice exams are outdated and are asking you about topics that are technical topics, but they're not on the exam anymore. So you're wasting time learning something that you're never going to see or use on the exam. And a lot of these questions occasionally just wrong. They'll ask one thing, but the answers have nothing to do with the question, or they get the answer wrong in the answers that they wrote, allegedly. That's just a horrible way to do any type of practice exams. So I knew that we needed to create a set of practice exams that I could write every single question, and I could provide you with a truly guaranteed accurate set of questions that would apply to the most recent exams. This means you're not studying things you don't need to study, and you're studying exactly the topics that could very potentially show up on the exam. So let's do a question from my practice exams book. Let's pop up that practice question now. I have so many screens up on my computer right now. Let's bring up a practice exams question. This is question A28 in my practice exams book. It's on page 11 of my 1202 book, which I put somewhere here, 1202 book. So if you were to go to page 11, you would find that one. If I would do that on mine, 9, 10, 11. Yep, there it is. So I'm on that page looking at it. The question asks, and again, we don't need to answer. Oh, thank you. Thank you, macOS, for expanding everything out there. The question we have here, again, please no answers in the chat room. In this case, we're not answering this on the Vevox side either. Just follow along with us as we go here. The question asks, a user on the headquarters network has opened a help desk ticket about their Windows desktop. When starting their computer, the login process proceeds normally, but the Windows desktop takes 15 minutes to appear. Yesterday, the desktop appeared in just a few seconds. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be slow profile mode, incorrect boot device order, faulty RAM, or incorrect username and password? All of these bad things, all of these that could create problems, but only one of them really would be the most likely reason. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to figure out the answer and, I don't know, keep it to yourself. I guess that's all we're doing in this case. I'm not giving you anywhere to put it. So you could just, we got to keep it there. We got to think about maybe not saying anything. But this is a really good example of, I think, what you would commonly see on an exam. It's a relatively detailed question. It has a number of options that could or could not potentially be the answer. They don't really do a lot of throwaway answers on the exam, I've noticed. Sometimes you'll get one of those on a question that will give these different things in there, but that's not what we're looking at either. So in this case, however, you'll notice that we're on page 11. If you just want to know whether it's A, B, C, or D, you go to page 33. If you want a detailed answer, and that's what we would like to see, it's on page 66. But when you're dealing with a PDF, do you just want to scroll all the way to page 66 and then scroll back to page 11? You do not, is the answer to that. But if you put your mouse right over the details, page 66, you can click that and it takes you to page 66. We just jump there through the magic of hyperlinks. That's really what we're doing in this PDF. And you can see the question is right there at the top, user on the headquarters network. They've opened a help desk ticket. Takes 15 minutes to appear some days, instantly other days. What in the world is going on? Is it a slow profile load, incorrect boot device order, faulty RAM, or an incorrect username and password? And as you can see here, we say the answer is A, slow profile load. Of those four options, we're saying that is the most likely reason for this issue. And we give you an explanation on why that is the right answer. Now, you've probably seen this in other practice exams, of course. You get the answer right, and it tells you, hey, you got the answer right, and here's yet more information on how right you are, which I can tell you doesn't help you very much. I mean, that it's nice to know you got it right, but you already knew you got it right. Telling me why I knew I got it right is a little bit redundant. The things that I think are most important is when you get it wrong. That's when you need more input. That's when you need more information. Well, why did I get it wrong? I thought I got it right. So in my book, every single wrong answer is documented as to why it is wrong. So when you look at the answers to these, you not only know why the right answer is right, you know why all the wrong answers are wrong, which then gives you more information that you're then able to use if you run into this on an actual exam. And of course, incorrect boot device order, faulty RAM, incorrect username and password weren't the right answer for this question, but they might be the right answer for another question you might get later. So being able to close that loop and give you more information about why wrong answers are wrong can be very, very, very valuable. You're almost getting 4 questions in one, at least 4 answers in one, right? Being able to work through that. So an incorrect boot device order, faulty RAM, or incorrect username and password can certainly create problems, but the one that really describes this problem is a slow profile load. And there can be many reasons why a profile would be loading slowly. Now, if you read this question, you didn't know any of this, you didn't even understand the words that I was using, right here at the bottom, we have a QR code and a direct link where you can go to the video that I used to create this question. So that way you can get more information on the details. You can maybe click through and learn a little bit that you didn't know before, and then you can come back to this question and deal with the answers and the questions again. Once you're done with this, of course, we need to go back to page 11. We're on page 60 something, right? We're on page 66. We need to go back to page 11. Well, in your PDF reader, you may not even realize there's a back button. There it is right there. And that's what you would use. You click your back button, click, and we're back to where we started. Back to page 11. And now we can go through with the next question that is on our list. That's my practice exams book. If you think that's something that might help you with your studies, it's available on my website, professormesser.com/core2pe, or simply use the main menus at the top of the website. Those hyperlinks are all, you've mentioned the digital books. That's what we were just looking at. This is the PDF. So those links are in the digital books along with we don't obviously have a hyperlink to the video, but the QR code that we have next to it is the same thing. So if you have the physical book, you can use the QR code to get there. If you're using the digital book, you can just click that link and it will take you to the Professor Messer website. Even tells you where it's going, how it will open it, what it will bring through, and you can watch the video right there. You get exactly the same information in the printed book as you do in the digital PDF. They are literally the same source material. They're just presented to you in a different way. Wow, did we go overtime today or what? We sure did, but don't worry. I've got plenty of time for our after show. We'll make sure we get to your questions in just a moment. If you would like to leave a question for our after show, use that link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. You can absolutely go through and work through the details of that. I've been saying this whole time that this comes from the objectives, the official CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you refer to this in the list of objectives. The objectives change every time there's an exam change. Make sure you're using the latest objectives. You've heard me say it 1,000,000 times, now 2,000,000. So you need to get your hands on these if you don't have them already. They are on the CompTIA website, but I have a link that will take you exactly where you need to go. It even gives you a link on the screen that tells you where you need to go with this. In fact, if I go to professormesser.com/objectives, one of the things that it shows you on the screen is a screenshot of the objectives themselves so that you can either click through to the objectives, or you'll notice I give you what the page looks like over on the CompTIA website. And I tell you, scroll down to find the red box that's on the screen. That's where it is. The red box that's right there. That's where you want to go. And I also tell you, you may not see the red box. The red box might not be there. The red box is missing. Why is it missing? Because you filtered out JavaScript. That's why. So you need to enable cookies, disable pop-up blockers, or remove other filters to see the red box. Make sure that it is there. You're filtering it. That's why it's not there. It's not you. It's your browser. That's what is about that. And a lot of browsers these days come with filters already turned on. Some of you in the chat are even mentioning some of those browser types. You just turn off the filters and it works. So that's the way you work through that. If you were going to figure out the details of getting those objectives, I think that's your first troubleshooting task, is figuring that part of it out. So have a look at what your options are. That's where you want to go, professormesser.com/objectives. We do one of these study groups every month. We're not done with April. In fact, in the rest of April, we have a Network Plus study group on 14th. That would be, let's see, tomorrow's Friday. Then we get the next week, Monday, Tuesday. I've not even written these questions yet. So this will be just as new for me as it will be for you on the Tuesday, the 14th, our Network Plus. I think that might have been changed from Wednesday. So make sure you always check the calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. We also have our Security Plus study group scheduled for April the 22nd. So we've got plenty going on in April. But if you'd like to come back next month for our A Plus study groups, we are currently scheduling those groups for the 5th and 7th of May. Our Network Plus this will be the second Network Plus now in this list, would be the 13th of May and then the 27th. A little bit different in May. We're sort of skipping a week in the middle of the month because my life is chaos. That's why. Because things change quite a bit on this side. Sometimes I do have to move things around. If you ever want to know when the latest scheduled event is, I always keep this up to date. The instant something changes, you go to professormesser.com/calendar. If it's not in the calendar, it's not real. The moment I put it in the calendar, that's when we know about it. That's when it is a real thing. And being able to work through all of that. Well, we did get through this first hour, but we are going to do an after show. You did not run me off. We are not ending the stream yet. We're going to stay here for another hour and answer questions that you have. Since you've been answering my questions for an hour, why don't I answer yours? We can, of course, do that. Coming up next, don't forget about our course notes and practice exams available at professormesser.com/1202success. And we also have our discounted vouchers, including our Exam Hacks ebook, available for people that are in the US, Canada, or a US territory, which apparently is changing all the time. We're going to find out. There might be more of that coming. We've got also plenty on social media. You can find us at ProfessorMesser.com/Discord on our 24/7 chat. You got ProfessorMesser/X/YouTube/Instagram/Facebook/LinkedIn. You get the idea. If you want to find us, that's where you find us online. It's a great way to keep track of what we're doing here at ProfessorMesser.com. Well, thanks for being here in the first hour. We have a lot still to do. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to answer your questions next in our after show. But thank you so much for joining us in this first hour. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody. Okay, it is now time for me to get my act together on this side. I say that in the nicest possible way to myself. There's a lot of buttons and things to push on this side. I have to figure out, okay, if we do the study group and we're doing this other thing, then how do we need to set these screens up? How do we make all of this happen? So I'll tell you how to do that in just a moment. The most important part, of course, is this one right here. So please join us over at ProfessorMesser.com/QA, and you can submit your questions for our second hour at any time. In fact, we tell you exactly that right here on the screen. If I was to put something on the screen that you would be able to see, it would look something like this. You can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. We will be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution will not appear immediately. I say here may not because I want it to be a little nicer. We're not gonna be so abrupt, but I'll tell you, it's not going to show up on your screen right away. We put them in a big list back here, and then I go through the list to figure out what the possible answers or questions might be that I will answer. We say it right, might be able to do it right. So let's go to the questions that you have submitted already. Oh, a ton of stuff already in here, working through all the details of this. So let's start breaking down some of the questions you have, see if there's anything that might apply, or questions. I sometimes get lots of questions that are duplicated or very similar to questions I've gotten before. Those are great to go through. So even if you think, somebody else is going to ask that one, no, just go ahead and ask it, because we have a lot of people that just won't submit it because they think someone else is going to submit it. That doesn't make any sense at all. So let's start with our first question. And this question that I just sent over to the archive that I did not mean to. Our first question that we need to move over to a published view is from Sean, who asks, what is the most missed question or set of questions missed on a Core 2 exam? Well, I have thought long and hard about this, which is really the last 5 seconds or so, about this particular question. One of the challenges about the CompTIA exams is we don't know the answer to this question, and we will never know the answer to this question. At least I think we will never know the answer to this question. The most missed question or set of questions on the Core 2 exam, we don't know. CompTIA does not tell you which questions you got right or which questions you got wrong. They do provide you with documentation after your exam that tells you what you missed, but it only gives you the broad exam objective number for that. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Let's go back to our exam objectives, which I did load up prior to our live stream here. So here are the Core 2 exam objectives, our big list of them. Let's go to the first page of the exam objectives that tells us here's what the exam is about, here's how it's accredited, here's the development of the exam, the authorized material use policy. It has a little please note at the bottom. We can talk about that one. And then it gives us a breakdown of the domains. There are 4 domains on the Core 2 exam: operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. And there's a percentage that each domain is covered during the actual exam. So 28% of your exam will be operating systems, 28% of your exam will be security, 23% of your exam will be software troubleshooting, and 21% of your exam will be operational procedures. But that is a broad description of the entire domain. If we were to go into the first domain, which is operating systems, you can see the first section is explain common operating system OS types and their purposes. And you see a list of here of workstation systems, which would be Windows, Linux, macOS, Chrome OS. We've got iPad OS, iOS, Android. You've got various file system types, including NTFS, REFS, FAT32, ext4, XFS, APFS, exFAT, and what those all mean. Then you have vendor lifecycle limitations for end-of-life and update limitations and compatibility concerns between operating systems. That is a lot for a single domain. Now, on your exam, if you get a question asking you about NTFS and you get it wrong, and then you get a question about Chrome OS and you get it right, what you will see on the final output of your exam is that you missed at least one question in the section 1.1, explain common operating system types and their purposes. Okay, which question? Well, we're not going to tell you because we're not going to print that question out. You could potentially take everybody who's taken the exam and look at all of the questions they got wrong, and you could effectively recreate the exam. Nobody is really looking for that. That would not be a good use of anyone's time. It would certainly not prove the exam taught you anything. So the problem is that they're giving you this very broad description of things you missed. Did you miss both of the questions that came from the section? Did you miss one of the questions? Maybe there were 7 questions from this single section. The random number generator really hit you hard on that one. And maybe you missed only one of them and you got 6 right. You just don't know. So they will never tell you what topics you did really, really, really good on or really, really bad on. They will only give you a list of things you got wrong, separated out by those subdomains. Not really a great way to give any detailed view of how the exam went for you. And for that reason, it's hard for me to answer the question. Really difficult for me to answer a question that says, what is most missed? What is the most set of questions that are giving people the biggest problems? Well, I think that if you went through the exam objectives, you could probably figure out some of that. And for some people, it's a different answer. For example, we've had some folks in the chat earlier that were talking about Linux. And they said, I've worked with Linux for years. I'm very familiar with Linux. I know Linux like the back of my hand. Well, section 1.9, which says identify common features and tools of the Linux client desktop operating system. And it gives you a bunch of these commands. Look, there's ls, pwd. Those look familiar. Hey, is the top command in here anywhere? Oh, there it is. There's the top command. It's right there. There's the man command. So these are things we needed to know, but there's a lot more in this list. So if you're a Linux person, you already knew this. You already knew top. You already knew ls. You already knew man. You're very familiar with these. That section is probably going to go very well for you. But somebody maybe who's never touched Linux, maybe they forgot to study Linux, maybe they didn't bother studying Linux for whatever reason, these things happen. Maybe that's the section they got the most questions wrong on. So it's hard to say what question is the hardest because it's almost impossible to calculate that. We'll never really know for sure. We could probably take a guess based on some of the topics here, but it's going to be different for every single person. So that's why I don't ever tell you this is the section that everybody has trouble with, or this is the section that everybody has trouble with, because it really doesn't ever work out that way. Everybody has a different perspective of what they are bringing to the table, the things that they studied and the things that they already know. That makes it a little bit more difficult to try to determine what is really the hard part of this. I will say, broadly speaking, that as an entry-level exam, the A+ is really considered, it's the de facto entry-level certification into the world of information technology. So because of that, we don't tend to see a high level of complexity with the questions. They're really trying to focus you in on individual topics, very similar to what we did today. And knowing those topics will help you answer those questions on the exam. I don't think that the exams, either the core 1 or the core 2, are really that complex or difficult, but you have to know the content. If you don't know the content, it's incredibly difficult. But if you study what's in the exam objectives, a lot of people, they even come back to me and said, that exam was so easy. Oh, really? How long have you been studying? 6 months. And I went through every single bullet on the exam objectives. I understood every single one of them. And the exam was simple. Like, well, you should talk to somebody who hasn't studied as much as you. They would not say the exam was simple. It's all relative, isn't it? So the more you study, it's amazing how much easier the exam is when you study. For those of you that haven't been to college yet, this is sort of the realization I came to when I went to college. Wow, I studied for this exam and I did really well. I didn't study so well for this exam and I did really poorly. I wonder what the difference is. Granted, it took me a while. I was the person that took 5 years to get through a 4-year degree. I was that person. So you can sort of see, maybe not the best student to be able to work through the details, but I did get through it. I did get my degree. So there is that part of it. Even if you're working through the details of it, that can be a bit of a challenge. So don't worry so much on what's good, what's bad, what's something you should worry about. Focus on the objectives, and then it doesn't matter what they ask you. You're going to get the question right. Let's keep going through more questions of these. I had that question in the study group that asked about scripts, asked about very broad. Was it JavaScript? Was it Python? Was it PowerShell? I had all these scripts on the screen. And I always get questions after that about how much of this do we need to know about scripting? What do I need to start scripting things? What things do I need to script? Tell me what I should be scripting right now. Like, hold on, wait a second. Let's go back to the exam objectives that tell us, explain the basics of scripting. What are the scripting file types? This is what they are. .bat, .ps1, .vbs, .sh, .js, and .py. Ooh, what are those? We should know what those are. We need to know what those scripting types are. And then when would you use them? What is basic automation? What is restarting machines? What is remapping network drives? How are scripts used in a practical sense? They are used to do these particular tasks. Oh, they are? So what is that? What is an installation of an application? What is the gathering of information / data? What is initiating updates? And then there are other things we need to consider when using scripts. For example, unintentionally introducing malware. Little things. Browser or system crashes due to mishandling of resources. Those are important things to think about. But nothing in here says build a script, troubleshoot a script, run a script, make a script do this, make a script do that. You do not need to know how to develop, write, execute, or troubleshoot scripts as part of this exam because it's not in the exam objectives. And CompTIA sticks to these objectives like glue, like honey. So do not go outside the scope of this. Now, if you wanted to do some scripting, you went through this process and you thought, boy, it would be fun to do some Python, and it would. You should grab a Python tutorial. There's plenty on the internet. There's plenty on YouTube. You can load up Python in your operating system because it's a scripting language that works across many different operating systems, and you can run your own scripts. That would be great to do. That'd be a lot of fun to do, actually. But it's outside the scope of the exam. Knowing how to create and run a Python script is not what they're trying to teach you. They're trying to teach you, when would you use a Python script? What types of things would a Python script do for you? In what scenarios would Python be better than PowerShell? In what scenarios would PowerShell be better than Python? So you need to know that part of it. So don't worry so much about how much scripting do I need to do? Should I start programming? Do I need to go do a programming course? No, you do not. Because you're not going to program because you're in information technology. There you go. That's your answer. That is the one that I think a lot of people getting into technology don't realize, that programming is not IT. IT is not programming. Those two worlds do not collide at all. Maybe just a little sliver in the middle, but not much. In the Venn diagram of those two things, they don't really overlap very much. So that's why I tell people, don't worry about C++. That's the last thing you should worry about. You're not even going to touch C++ in your world. You need to be much more familiar with, how do you keep this operating system running? How do you keep this database safe? How do you back up all of this data? How do you store all of these logs? How do you manage and troubleshoot if a problem occurs? How do you plan for an outage? How do you plan for growth? How do you plan for cloud-based technologies? That is a career into itself, as it turns out. And it's much more involved than doing programming. On the other side, an entire world of application development requires you to know a lot more than just how do you type things into a terminal screen and get it to compile. There is a whole set of skills and techniques that will take you a lifetime to be able to learn. And that's why application developers do application development and information technology experts do information technology. because both of those things contain so much information, so many things to know, and so much, the scope is broad that you really can spend an entire lifetime in either one of those. There's no way you're going to have one person know all of those and know them well. I can tell you that. I do know people that know all of it to a point. So they're okay at programming and they're okay at IT, but they're not good at either one of them. That's the challenge you always run into. Let's keep doing some more on this and see what other options we might have available. More questions. If you'd like to submit a question, you can do that at any time by going to professormester.com/QA and submitting your question. Let's see what we have there to be able to work through. This is a common question, but I think it's worth talking about, from Brogan, who says, what's your advice for someone who doesn't have access to macOS or iOS readily available to study for the exam? One of the things you even notice in the exam objectives is they go into a lot of detail about command line in Linux, command line in Windows, the Windows operating system, the Windows utilities, and they go into a little bit of macOS. And I would say if you were to look at the exam objectives, they really kind of cover macOS about as much as you would see macOS in an actual environment. They barely touch on macOS. We go back to section 1 of our exam objectives and have a look at section 1.8, explain common features and tools of the macOS desktop operating system. And they don't go into a lot of detail here. They talk about different file types, things you may or may not have seen, the .dmg, .pkg, .app. They talk about the App Store. They talk about the uninstallation process. These are such broad topics that you don't need access to macOS to understand this. You can watch my video and understand everything you need to know for the exam. You could watch a third-party YouTube video of them working at the macOS environment. If you really, really, really wanted to touch on macOS, you wanted to use macOS as an operating system, that's where you want to go. There are cloud-based services on the internet that will rent time on a macOS system. Maybe that's what you do. I know that Amazon provides macOS as part of their virtual desktop capabilities. So maybe you spend $10 and now you've been using a Mac for an hour and you're good. In fact, that's plenty of time to use macOS and know everything you needed to know. You've got system folders you need to know, corporate restrictions, how do you do backups, what's antivirus like, how do you do patches, what is rapid security response? That would be a good thing to know because that's something that was used like 2 weeks ago from Apple. Suddenly our Apple devices restarted themselves. Suddenly our phones and our desktops suddenly were restarting and doing things automatically. It didn't ask for an update. It just did an update because the rapid security response was used. In fact, I don't know on my current version of macOS if I'm still running that version. So I'm going to pull up my About This Mac just so we can see. And in fact, it is. So for those of you familiar or not familiar with Mac, you go up to the Apple menu, which you don't see here, but there it is, Apple menu, and choose About This Mac. Click, and it brings up a little dialog box. And mine is a Mac Studio running. This is an old one from 2022. It's just a workhorse. It runs like a champ. I keep thinking I'm going to replace it. And then I think, why would I do that? This is such a good machine. It's an Apple M1. So old. It's just an old M1. 128 gig of memory. It does. We do video editing here, 4K, and a lot of it. So it's just chock full of RAM. And you can see the serial number for those of you interested. But look at the macOS number. It's running Tahoe, which the number for that operating system is 26.3.1A. It's got an A there at the end in parentheses. Why is there an A? You don't usually see that. Why is there an A in parentheses for that? Well, that's because they used the rapid security response, which means they pushed out a patch whether you wanted it or not. And they always put it in parentheses with a letter. So A was the one they pushed out for the rapid security response. If they wanted to push another one today, it would be B. They did one the day after that, it would be C. You see how this works. That's rapid security response. We really didn't need access to macOS to be able to know that. In fact, everything you needed to know, I just told you when it deals with rapid security response and how it works in the actual world. So another one to think about. Now, when you get into system preferences, that might be different. system preferences are part of the macOS operating system that show you information about your computer and how it's configured, dealing with general accessibility, appearance, desktop and dock displays. Well, if you're running Windows, and I do this in my video course, if you're running Windows, this is your control panel. On macOS, we call it the system preferences. That's all this really is. So you may want to get some hands-on because maybe macOS is very foreign to you and maybe you do better by actually touching it and working with the OS. That's perfectly reasonable, but you don't have to for the exam. I think you can go through everything that's listed in this relatively small 1.8 section and go through all of these different features and capabilities, and you know everything you need to know for the exam. You will not be presented on the exam, or at least no one has been presented yet on the exam. Don't ask me how I know. That it presents macOS desktop that requires people to move around and do things on the macOS desktop. They've not asked that yet. Could they ask that? They could, probably. I think that there's a couple features here that would be good where they could say, okay, start up the dock or change a configuration of Finder or configure this in Disk Utility. I guess they could do that. But because there's such a small percentage of macOS in the corporate world, this is all relative, of course, there's much more Windows. The exam tends to focus more on the Windows side. So currently, I don't think hands-on on macOS or even iOS is required for the exam, as long as you understand the topics that are listed in the official exam objectives. If you know that, I think you'll be okay on the exam, and getting hands-on will not be a super important priority. iOS is a little more complicated to get hands-on. It's kind of hard to find someone giving you time on iOS in the cloud. They do have an iOS emulator in the macOS development software, but you have to be running macOS to be able to run the iOS simulator. So that doesn't quite work either. If you had macOS, you probably wouldn't need to find macOS. And then if you didn't have macOS, you probably also don't have iOS. You get the idea. So you will run into things like that. If you know somebody who has them, if they have iOS, if they have macOS, all you need is like 15 minutes on that platform and you'll know everything you need to know. iOS is just a very similar in usability and functionality to Android. Well, I just made a lot of people angry on both sides by saying that, but that's kind of the truth. If you want to run Mail in iOS, you click the Mail button. If you want to run Mail on Android, you click the Mail button. So it's basically the same thing, isn't it? It's all the same. iOS, the only difference is that iOS doesn't reboot randomly. Now we got an argument. Now I'm looking forward to your emails. That was easy. Let's do more questions, shall we? Just going to drop that one right there and we're going to keep moving. Next on our list, and going through the details of this, there were a lot of questions I got in this list today that were about how do I prepare for the performance-based questions? What about drag and drop performance-based questions? Again, I would highly recommend that you ignore the functionality of how to work with a question and you instead focus more on what type of content do I need to know? What type of information is going to be important to know? And if you know the exam objectives, if you have gone through every single bullet and you understand what each one of these things means, you know what all of the different system preferences are, you work through all of these different Linux commands, you know all of the things that are listed in this document, it doesn't matter how they ask the question. They could ask the question about Linux utilities. They could ask it as a matching question. They could ask it as a drag and drop question. They could ask it as a fill in the blank question. They could ask it as a put you at a command prompt and have you type things in question. They could ask it in, there is an unlimited number of ways to ask these questions. That's the whole idea behind performance-based questions is you don't know how they are going to ask the question. But here's the thing, doesn't matter. You already know all of the Linux commands. Whether they introduce it as drag and drop, matching, fill in the blank, typing in a command prompt, or whatever, it doesn't matter. You're going to be able to answer the question. So don't worry about, Well, it might be drag and drop. You already know how to do drag and drop. That's all, that's all you do. It's have a drag and drop question. That's how it works. So don't worry so much about how they ask the question. Worry more about, do I know the answers? And if you worry from that perspective, then it doesn't matter how they ask it. One very common piece of feedback I constantly get from people who have gone through my course is they will go take the exam. And when they come back, they almost always say, well, I was really worried about the performance-based questions. It turned out they were nothing. I worried for nothing. They were so easy. They were very straightforward. I knew exactly what to do. I knew what all the answers were. I put them in. We were done. So I think a lot of times it's the fear of the unknown that we run into. We don't know what could be presented. They could ask anything. They could ask it in any way. And we'd have to figure it out. Don't worry. You got it. As long as you know the exam objectives, they could ask you to spell it backwards. You could answer the question. So that's why I tell people, don't worry so much about the process. Worry about what you know. As long as you get those exam objectives in your brain, doesn't matter how they ask. You'll be okay. Don't overthink things. It's not going to be that difficult. You're good. Folks, chat room saying the Herman Miller chair. No. This is a $120 Office Depot chair, quite honestly. It's been a trooper. I've had it for, 15 years. They don't sell them anymore. Haven't sold them for a long time. At any point, I expect the hydraulic in the chair to go out. You'll just see me sinking down in the chair one day on a live stream. It's going to happen. But right now, it's working. And when it does fail, I'm going to go get a Herman Miller chair. That's how that works. I'm going to go out and get a Herman Miller right away. So although it is not Herman Miller, it will be. That's what I think is going to happen. I don't know if that's true or not, but there'll be a nicer chair, certainly, when we get to that point. The whole studio itself, if you're interested in what is this craziness that we do here in the studio with this, okay, I realize, the first thing is you recognize that there's a problem. That is step one. You have an issue. There's a problem here. I recognize that. I am just not willing to fix it, just so you're aware. But here, there's a lot of different pieces, and we try to put all the pieces together so that you can really get a perspective of this. If you're interested in what all of this stuff is, it's on our website. So you can absolutely go out there. If I go to www.professormesser.com/studio, it's also a link from the main page. You can go to the studio link. I guess you're not seeing that because I'm not putting it there. And on the studio link, if you want to know what microphone is that, what camera am I using, what is the video switcher that we've got running, how is the audio here coming through, why is that audio so delicious? Well, it's the Mackie DLZ creator, of course. So you've got, and of course, other things. Somebody asked me in the last study group what stand I am using for the Mac, for the MacBook. We even did that one, but it's not in this list. I need to put it in the list. Lori sent me the note about that. I just haven't done it yet. I got to get through that. But all of those are there if you want to know more about the studio and the things we're doing in the studio and how all of this works. And it's all there. You can step through all of it to be able to figure it out. So useful to have there. I do like this Mackie, though. The audio that we use now, the audio that we have on our latest videos, on our latest live streams, I'm very happy with that mixer. It's remarkable when we started this company, this experiment that has sort of escaped the lab. When we started this, I used the same mic. This is the same microphone I've been using the entire time. Literally the same physical microphone. But I've swapped out mixers through the years. This is the best sounding mixer I've had so far and the easiest one to set up. Audio is not a simple thing to set up. Audio is in no way, and it's even not 100% on my side, to be fair. There are things I still want to update and change with this, but it's really good. What we're running right now, we're really happy with. And as many people will tell you, if you've not been in the world of creating video for any type of use, the audio is more important than the video. If your video is kind of splotchy, maybe it's a low resolution, you can kind of work through it. You can keep it going. But if the audio is bad, you can't even listen. You can't even watch it. So we go from that perspective when we talk about video, just so you are aware of those. We got a lot to go through here. And I know I said we would go a little bit over time. with some of this because I talk so much. One of the things I mentioned earlier, I think, see if I have VirtualBox on my system. V is for VirtualBox, and I have a lot of apps on my machine. I'm really sorry about all the apps that I have here because I just want to find the VirtualBox app that I'm running. And the reason I'm looking for a very specific icon is I got a lot of stuff that's running on my system. And I mentioned VirtualBox earlier because I want you to go set up a VM if you have not done this already, and I want you to run Linux on it. So where you need to go is to virtualbox.org. VirtualBox. This is a technology that is now, I think it used to be, what didn't it used to be Sun that started this? And of course, it was purchased by Oracle. So it's now Oracle VirtualBox. But if you go to virtualbox.org, here's what you got here. Let's put me down here. VirtualBox, this is free virtual machines for your computer. This is it. So you can run this on standard x86 64 hardware. You can run it on macOS as long as your virtual machines are able to run in this. You've got different versions you can use. So this is effectively, if you're running Windows, it's a Windows app. You download it, you run the install, and it loads up VirtualBox. And I think I have VirtualBox running in macOS here, but it looks and feels very similar to the VirtualBox that you would run anywhere else. I don't usually run VirtualBox on my computer, but we're going to look here anyway. I got a lot here that's happening. This is VirtualBox. On the left side are all the virtual machines that I previously configured. On the right side is a summary of the VirtualBox that I've currently clicked on. So if I click on the Atlantis Research Lab, this is Windows 7. Haven't run this one in a while. It's got a 4 gig base memory. It has 256 video memory. I've got a primary drive of 40 gig. I've also configured an optical drive here, which I could use virtually. Obviously, in a virtual machine, you don't have an actual optical drive, but that's where you would install your ISO file, for example, which works and acts as if it is a virtual optical drive. The audio that we're running, the network adapter configuration, USB, and so on. If we go down here to, I was playing around with this the other day and wanted to load up OS2 Warp. Go back about 25 years, and you can run like really, really old operating systems because you're running VirtualBox, which is kind of nice. Or you could run things like this MacOS Research Lab, which is right here. That's running Red Hat, 64-bit Red Hat on the MacOS Research Lab with 16 megabytes of video memory because I think it was just a text-based front end, and running with those. This is a great tool to use because it's free. There are other virtual machine hypervisors that you could run on your desktop. For example, VMware makes VMware Workstation if you're on Windows. I think they made their macOS version of VMware's, I don't think they call it Workstation, but on macOS, they have a similar one that I think it used to be you couldn't get it for free. Now I think that it is. I use a commercial product on macOS called Parallels that does a similar thing. Fusion, thank you. That is the name of the VMware version of that, is Fusion. I use Parallels on my macOS because, quite honestly, it's better than Fusion. Fusion is one that is compatible with Windows, but for macOS, it's nice to have something that's more integrated into the operating system. And so Parallels, it's a personal preference, I guess. So running Parallels, but it's all basically the same. You can build out a separate machine. So let's build out a new VM, shall we? First, let's figure out where we're going to get Linux from. Want to build out Linux? This is what we're going to need to do. For purposes of just being simple with this, I'm going to go to Linux Mint, M-I-N-T. Why choose Mint? Because it makes everybody who doesn't use Mint angry at me, I guess. That's what we would do. But Linux Mint is a very popular Linux distribution. It has a very friendly front end. If you used Windows, you'll probably do pretty well with using Mint. You also have a little more control of the operating system. A lot of people say, I'm going to load Ubuntu. and run that one. That is a very, very popular desktop version of Linux, but it also blocks and limits a lot of root access to the operating system, which is good if you're giving that operating system to a family member. But if you want to do some real heavy-duty Linux stuff, sometimes it gets in the way. So to make things a little more simpler, maybe use a different distribution. But there's other distributions you can use. Just pick what you want, go to the download page for the distribution, and download it. Linux Mint. And then you can choose a different version. There's different editions, some that are, this one has the Cinnamon edition. We also have the XFCE, X-Face version. You got the Mate version. You've got different flavors of this same thing. They have different desktops. You can see they look a slightly different in their desktop. We aren't talking about dramatic differences, but some people, there we go. Now the Linux people are showing up. No, you need to run KDE. What are you thinking? Just download Kali and you're good. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Sorry, you're not going to get in a fight with me. If you want to do that, go do it. That's the beauty of Linux. Why wouldn't you? Or maybe both. We could do both. That's crazy. Now that you've downloaded the ISO, you would now need to create a virtual machine. Let's create one from scratch, shall we? I'm just going to go up here to the top, and we're going to add a virtual machine. Oh, I don't have one in here, so let's do a new one. What am I thinking? Let's do a new virtual machine. And this is great. It just takes you through this little wizard. And the wizard's going to show you everything here. You've got, what name do you want to call it? Let's call this Linux Mint Testing. And it's going to put it into my VirtualBox VM section. It even says, oh, have you downloaded an ISO? You can just put it. Now, I didn't download the one that was there because we're currently on a live stream. And the last thing I want to do is use bandwidth unnecessarily, effectively downloading and crashing everything we're doing here. I didn't really download one beforehand as we were talking about this. This is once you downloaded the ISO, you put it here and you just have it go. You say finish and it's done. Now, if you wanted to customize things, you wanted to maybe make it a different hard drive and a different size, it defaulted to 25 gig as the hard drive size. That's pretty big for just a test Linux distribution. So maybe we bring this down to maybe 4 gig, 2 gig, somewhere in there, 2.5, 2 3/4. Put it somewhere like that. Make it whatever you'd like. Obviously, the more drive space you're using, the less drive space you'll have for other things, although most of the time, they don't pre-allocate the entire size of it. They simply build onto it as you go, which is kind of nice. So you can say, make it a 10 gig drive, but if you're only using 2 gig of it, that's all the space that's using on your system. So it's very easy to set this up. And then once you're done, you can customize the hardware configuration of it. I'm going to say, okay, it's now created a new entry here. I launch it. When it launches the ISO file. It runs the setup program. And now we're running Linux. That was it. And most Linux distributions these days install pretty quick. In 10 minutes, you're running Linux. That's it. You're up and running. So that was a very bad name to use, Linux Mint Testing. I really didn't follow. Somebody did not get the memo, and that was me. So we need to change this. Can I change the settings of this? From instead of Linux Mint Testing, this is Linux Mint that's in the gate room. I know we have another gate room there as well. So we'll put this one in the gate room as well. Not really spending a lot of time thinking about that. We should really work it all into the same meme, right? It needs to be the same thing. You folks know what I'm talking about. This is the, maybe this one, now that I've had the time to think about it, this is our Chevron 7 VM. That's what that is. That was C. Much better. Much better. That's what I was thinking. That's where we'd go with that one. That, and then once you're finished, you simply, in fact, I have my Parallels desktop here. It boots up. In fact, here's a virtual machine running live on my computer. It is a Fedora 4 or Fedora 40 ARM64 version because I'm running on an M1 platform like we just saw. And this is, it just booted up and here we are, but it's a window. This is a window. I could, of course, make it full screen. If you watch any of my videos, everything is running in full screen. So it looks just like, look, it's a Linux machine, everybody. It's not, it's really a macOS machine running Linux. In fact, you can pull this out of the way, and behind there is the stuff we were just doing. on our view of this. So this is running Fedora. I can go through this Fedora configuration. I'm moving the video around, so it's adjusting the video every time I do that. I can put in my password, which is unnecessarily large. And now we're at the desktop of our Linux machine. I can start the menus up. I can click the apps that are on this machine. I can run the calculator, and it'll bring up the calculator on my Linux desktop. Let's run something else. We'll go to our menu here. We'll run the file manager for files. Very nice. We'll go back. So all of this is running on the Linux platform, including popping down to the terminal. And now you got a terminal screen. And now you can run the top command. You can run the man top command. Goes through the top configuration. You can do the ls command. It's all, you're running Linux. That's it. That's how it works on every platform. That is what you would run. So you could be up and running with Linux and be able to do everything you need to do to study for this exam in 10 minutes. On Windows, on macOS, and on Linux, that's how you would work through it. Very, very easy to have it this way. Now, if you're running on my web server doesn't have this graphical front end. Most servers running Linux, you don't get this GUI. You don't get this graphical user interface. All you get is a console. That's it. So that's why on this, not only on this certification, but other certifications as well, they tend to focus on the terminal. If you were to take Linux Plus, for example, they really focus at the command line. It's all about the command line. I almost want to say unlike Windows, but Windows has gotten a lot better lately. But as people often say, you can do everything you need to know at Linux at the command line because that's the native environment for Linux. The graphical environment is something extra you load on top of it. Whereas with Windows, the graphical environment is the operating system, and you have to kind of drill down into the command line from there. These days, that's not technically true with Windows, but that's effectively how you should be thinking about it because that is effectively how it works. You don't really have Windows starting up in a command line only mode. I know they have that type of thing now, and some people do use it, but not many people. Most of the time when you're running Linux, your Linux server, you're always at a command line. It's really hard to find a Linux server that has loaded up the graphical front end because why would you run a graphical front end that nobody is using if you're running a server? You can save a lot of resources just by using the command line that's there. So a lot of what I do in Linux is all of the command line. I never bring up a graphical front end in Linux, which is one of the reasons they always point to the big list of Linux commands in the Core 2 exam, just so you get a feel for that. So there you go. That really is how easy it is to load up Linux on your machine. You could do this weekend. You could do it today. Get everything running. It's really hard to break something because it's a virtual machine. It's closed in. You can do anything you want on Linux. You can change the Linux configuration. You can do a lot of that. That is a really good example of where working with Linux and going through the steps of Linux is really easier than you might think, just by using some type of virtualization to make that happen. That VM we were seeing before, where we had brought up top and we looked at the other things that we were just in, was running in my Parallels configuration. So just to give you a feel for what we do. A lot of the testing and secondary work I do on my website, I do locally in a VM. If it works, I push it out to production. Sort of the way it was designed to be. I know we're past the top of the hour, but then again, I kind of went overtime with the last one. So let's keep going on this list of things. Some folks asked, what is my favorite Linux distribution? My favorite. I don't have a favorite. I guess that's good, right? I don't have a favorite Linux distribution, but there are many Linux distributions I like to use. Let's see, what Linux am I using now for my other configuration? We just saw a couple of them. I mentioned Mint. I mentioned Ubuntu. In the past, I was running a lot of CentOS. CentOS obviously has kind of been pushed to the side by the folks at Red Hat, so I don't use CentOS anymore. But I would like to see what I am running. It's very interesting because I moved to a new provider a couple months ago. I moved from one provider of my website services, my hosting provider. I moved from one hosting provider to a new hosting provider, which was great. It was nice to be able to do that. But I didn't pay a lot of attention to the Linux flavor because for what I'm doing, that was not the most important part. I know you might be saying to yourself, what are you talking about? How are we supposed to fight if you don't have a favorite Linux? Maybe that's why. Maybe that's the reason that I don't have a favorite. Then we have nothing to fight about. We can all just say, oh, they're all good or they're all bad, or we can go kind of that direction with it. But that's kind of where I go with that piece of it. I wanted to log in here and see if I can quickly figure out the ins and outs of this. Now this does make sense. So I run as part of ProfessorMesser.com and a lot of the other tertiary services around that is currently in Debian. So I really made a change. I went from CentOS to Debian. That's a change, people. That's like, it's not night and day, but it is a little different. You get very accustomed to the utilities and the functionality of a Linux, and then you change that, and now you type one thing in, and suddenly it doesn't work anymore. You got to figure out the details of that. That's why. So that's something you might want to consider, loading up a Debian into your virtual machine as well. That might be a good one to try. Good enough for my website, so why not try it for yours as well? Be a good way to do it. Let's keep going through your list of questions. This is a question, interestingly enough, if you ever get into this, this becomes a little bit of a challenge. This is a question that says, how many questions are in this exam anyway? Buddy, pal, friend, how many questions per core exam? And this is, I think the reason a lot of people ask this is that it keeps changing, or at least they perceive that it keeps changing. How many questions are in this exam? I think for this particular question, where should we go to find out? That's right. The exam objectives. That's where we're going. Let's put me down here. The exam objectives can tell us, can't it? So we go straight to the second page of information about the exam, test details. This is the A+ Core 2, the 220-1202. Number of questions, maximum of 90. And it consists of both multiple choice and performance-based over a time frame of 90 minutes. Maximum of 90, and I think this is what gets people kind of messed up. They see 90, they think, I'm going to get 90 questions. Let me be ready for 90 questions. And they sit down the exam and they get 80 questions. They get 77 questions. And they're thinking, where's my questions? Where'd they go? Are we missing questions? Nope. That's perfectly normal. In fact, it's really unusual to have 90 questions on an exam, as it turns out. Most of the time, the reports that I see are somewhere in the lower 70s, higher 80s range. So yeah, like 78 to 88, somewhere in their number of questions. Could they give you 90 questions? Yes, they could, because they told you they could. But most of the time, and what I think is happening behind the scenes, if we were to surmise, if we were to guess, and this is pure conjecture, in fact, if anybody ever tells you, here's how they do the numbers, here's how they make the exam up, here's how they figure the questions, here's how they grade the exam, they're lying to you. Nobody knows. They're just guessing too. They're just not telling you that. Pure guessing, pure conjecture. I would say that the number of questions is based on some formula they use that determines how hard all of the questions are overall. So for example, they might give you 90 questions on an exam, but they would be the easier ones. I think if you're getting fewer questions on the exam, I think that's because they feel that some questions are going to take longer than others. And so you're going to need that extra time. That's how I think in my mind they must be coming up with that. Could that be true? Sure. Could it be completely wrong? Yes, it could. May have no idea how they do this. I might be completely wrong. It might just be random. Yeah, we tell them 90, but just give them 77. Give them 80. I don't know. Maybe that's what they're doing. Or maybe there's an actual method to the madness. I'm not sure. Couldn't tell you. but that's what they plan on now, is you'll probably get somewhere in the upper 70s, middle 80s, somewhere in there usually is what people will get. Just prepare for 90. If you look at our practice exams, there are 3 practice exams in this book. Of the practice exams, 90 questions in each practice exam. So I'm going with worst possible case, right? I don't know if that's worst, but the worst would be something much worse than that. But 90 questions total in each exam. 5 of them are performance-based questions. 85 of them, because we did the math, are multiple choice questions. And that's how I distribute them in here. So there's none of this thought of one of the exams is 78 questions. One of the exams is 82 questions. No, I'm giving you 90 in each one of them because that potentially could be your exam. Now, the distribution, I'm just guessing at. 5 performance-based and 85 multiple choice? I don't know. Just seems about right. You get about a handful of performance-based questions on your exam. Sometimes people get more than 5. Sometimes people get less than 5. I don't know. It comes out in the wash. Statistically, I said 5 is your mean, somewhere in there. I didn't do great with stats either. But that's one. I think the average that people are getting is 5, so we're going to go with 5. But you could get more or less. So total in here, 15 performance-based questions in the whole book. And I think we should do one that maybe, I'd love a whole book of just performance-based questions. That would be fun. And we go through all kinds of questions, trying a lot of different things. Good way to do that. CompTIA has sort of done that in their CertMaster practice. They have a lot of performance-based questions in CertMaster practice. That's available on our website at a discount as well. That is CompTIA's own practice exams. They're online only. But they give a lot of different kinds of questions. So it just depends on where you go and how that works with that. So good way to work through it. Good way to consider the number of questions. Again, I really can't emphasize this enough, is it's not about the number of questions. It's how well you know the content. We don't spend, and you probably don't, but let me just reiterate, don't spend a lot of extra time trying to reverse engineer the exam. You will not be able to, at least not with any accuracy. So don't waste your time wondering, how many questions do I have to get wrong and still pass? There's no way to know. How many questions am I going to get on my exam? There's no way to know. How do they score the exam? There's no way to know. What is the total number of, we can't, I don't know. There's no way to know. We just don't know. And we will never know, and they're not going to tell us. Maybe someday they'll tell us, and then you can come back to me and say, you're wrong. We now know. I'll take it. I'm happy with that. We finally got there. So the important part of the exam is the content, not the function. It's more about what you know, not what you are doing. If you know it, doesn't matter how they ask the questions. It doesn't matter the distribution of the questions. It doesn't matter whether they're multiple choice or matching or fill in the blank or whatever. You're going to get it right. You're going to pass your exam. Stick to the content. Stick to the exam objectives. You stick to the exam objectives. You know every single bullet of the exam objectives. You can answer and explain each bullet of those objectives to yourself or to someone else. You are ready to take this exam, and you will crush it. You will just kill it because you know all of that content. That's what you should focus on. Let's keep going. We do have a little bit more time here. I just wanted to fill in that last few bits that we have. I think it would be good to maybe get a couple more questions in if I can find that piece of it. Someone asked a question about, might as well put it up. Might as well show it. Says, why do we need to know about AI on this exam? I think the question is, what do we need to know about AI on this exam? Although I'm kind of with you on the why. I'm there in a little bit of the why. Let's not worry about the why right now. Don't worry. Once all this goes away, they'll take it off the exam. We don't have to deal with it anymore. Once everybody realizes that there's really no clothes on this emperor, then maybe we'll change our idea of just how much we need to know about AI on any particular exam. So the question, not why, but what related to AI is on this exam? Well, where could we possibly go to get information about this? I know where. The exam objectives, of course it is. We're going to go all the way to the bottom of the last section of the last part of this exam. I think CompTIA knows what time it is. And they say section 4.10, explain basic concepts related to artificial intelligence, AI. Application integration. Tell us about AI with application integration. Well, what can't you say these days? Every application is AI enabled, which apparently doesn't mean anything because I tried to use it. And well, maybe it does mean something, but application integration, it's everywhere. We talk about that in the video. Appropriate use, plagiarism. So how is AI being used from those perspectives? What are the limitations of AI? Sort of a leading question. No, they broke it down as it relates to bias, hallucinations, and accuracy. We'll talk about that one. That'd be a good one. That's also in our video. And of course, we have issues relating to data security, data sources, data privacy, especially as it goes to private versus public AI engines that you might set up. That is what AI is being covered on this exam. Now, I realize that wasn't your question. Your question was, why do I need to know this? Well, you need to know this because very large companies are spending literally billions of dollars on researching what could possibly come of a technology that will take a one-sentence email and give you a summary that is 5 sentences long. That's what we're doing with AI. They're doing a bang-up job. I'm looking so forward to seeing what that tens of billions of dollars is able to do for us. All I can really tell you is remember ATM, not automatic teller machines. Remember that? Next biggest thing. We're going to invest billions of dollars in this networking infrastructure. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to run telephone systems. It's going to run video systems. It's going to run our data. It's going to be everywhere to everybody. It's going to be everything. You need to swap out your entire network. What? Where'd it go? What happened to ATM? It told us it was going to be everywhere. It was part of the hype curve. We can't always get it right, people. We're technologists. We're trying different things. We're trying to put it in place. We're trying to see where it fits. Sometimes it doesn't fit. Sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. So we'll see how that turns out on the AI side. It's really done wonders for me. AI has not touched my life at all. It has not provided me with any value. I think it solves a number of problems that none of us have. That's all I can really tell at this point. So I'm looking forward to have the problems so that I can then solve them with AI. And then we'll be good. That's all we will need to make this happen. I'm sure they'll come up with something that will be useful. What I think, though, is that we've kind of passed the hype curve. We're kind of coming down on the hype curve. And this is the time where we will start trying to figure out real ways to use some of these technologies. I still have questions about what that might look like, but at least that gives you some perspective of using those. I don't know, maybe we will really find ways to do it. Where the only place where I really think this works, and I've mentioned this on other study groups, the places where we really have problems that need to be solved are problems dealing with large data sets. Big data is where AI would excel. And I mean real AI, not this thing that they are just, it's sort of like the word cybersecurity now. It's just being used for everything and anything is AI. Photoshop is now AI. My spreadsheet wizard is AI. I don't know anymore what they're trying to tell me that it is. But with big data, think about data sets around information that we are capturing relating to cancer. What if we had some system that could really go through that data in much more detail than a human ever could to find correlations, to find new things that we weren't able to see before? In the world of IT, this fits very well into the security world. Because as you can imagine, and I've had this happen, of course, we've often talked about SIMs, the security information management. This is your log consolidation tool. So imagine the logs that you would get from a typical corporate network. It would be logs in every Windows machine, every Windows server, every Linux machine and server, every router, every switch, every firewall, every load balancer, every storage manager, everything that we do in IT has a log file associated with it. Now, if it's your house, there's already a lot of log files. Imagine an international company with hundreds of sites and equipment at all of those, all of those log files today come back to a consolidation server or multiple consolidation servers. That's storing the data for us. And the way that we've done this in the past is we have interactively gone out to that device sort of on an ad hoc basis, or maybe we set up a weekly report that it gives us. Show me all of the authentication failures for the last 24 hours, and it shows us that information. It's very reactive. By the time we've read the report, the problem has already occurred. There's a lot happening there that could be faster, but it's so much data that one report takes hours just to create. Now, what if we could really solve that problem by having an automated process look through our large data sets to find hackers that are already living on our network or that are trying to get in, and we can be informed of that automatically in real time. We can also correlate that back to other data sets outside of our organization, to other attack types that are happening to other places in real time, compare all of those things. Is it also happening to us? Yes, it is. That is information that is a very different action than we've ever had before. And we're able to do that because we finally have the technologies not only to store enormous amounts of data, something we really have not been able to do in the past, not to this degree. And now we have built kind of a framework that allows us to build applications to really sift through that data in ways that we haven't been able to do before, which takes a different perspective. You can't just flip through it one page at a time going, well, is it here? Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? It has to be a lot more intelligent than that. See, there is a little bit of AI that could happen there. Those are cases I could see that make a lot of sense, but they're not outward facing. They're certainly not consumer type artificial intelligence. I mean, if you want a picture of a duck on a boat drinking a martini, that's pretty much what consumers get these days. But there is some real work to be done back in the back of the office, back in the detailed large data set side. I still haven't seen any of this yet. They're working on it. It's getting better, but they still have a lot of work to do. And I don't know that they've got tens of billions of dollars of work to do, but they do have some work that they need to do. And it might turn out to be a thing. Or it may just be more advanced scripting. We just don't know yet. We aren't quite sure, but we have the fundamentals and the terms that we need to use about AI as a subsection of one of the subdomains in the existing Core 2 exam. So you need to know about bias and you need to know about hallucination. And I give you some examples of those in the video so that you can be at least more familiar about the things that you've probably already seen happening with some of the AI that has been rolled out now. But now we have a name to put with it. Now we understand what's going on. Oh, that's a hallucination. That's why it's giving me a bunch of nonsense on the screen. So that's the place that I think AI will fit best in my mind. Will we see that? Will it ever come to fruition? Will they come off of the hype that's there? We don't know. I don't think they know, but they're going to figure out something. Am I an investor? Not a chance. I don't think they are ever going to see an ROI on the money that they've invested there, but that's up to them. It's their money. They can do whatever they want. That's the cash that they got. It's up to them to figure out if that's going to make sense. It could be an interesting result from that. It could be a kind of disastrous result for a number of companies that have invested hard into a series of technologies that could potentially never resolve to be anything. Looking at you, Force Systems. So that's kind of the way the industry tends to work anyway, is being able to test some things out, see if it works, and to the victors go the spoils. Sometimes entire companies will shut down because they made the wrong decision about where they're going to put the next 5 to 10 years of their company. It happens. Will that affect us? Probably not. One good thing about technology is that we tend to fill the holes very quickly. And this world of IT moves very, very, very fast. So when people said, IT is going to take all our jobs, my response was, oh, if it's the IT they're showing us now, taking jobs, and it's the AI that they're submitting to IT, it's going to take the jobs, I'll take that all day. Because it's clearly not working. You're going to need somebody to fix it. We will be the ones to fix it. They're going to try it. It doesn't work. Somebody's got to step in and and resolve the issues. Somebody still has to fix the problems. Where's all the problems that it's fixing? It's not doing it. So we can certainly be those folks. I think AI is also making people dumber in many ways. At least the consumer-facing AI I find to be very, very much putting people in the wrong direction. I feel like using Google taught us things. We could go to a website, it would direct us to the right place, to the experts in the field. We could read about what they had to say. We could learn about that technology, and we were better for that. Now I feel like we're getting a lot of hallucinations and summaries of things that shouldn't be summarized. And in many ways, people are using that to solve problems for themselves, which means they aren't learning how to do it, which makes them less knowledgeable. Well, if you're more knowledgeable, you're in a better position in this industry. So I think in many ways, we're in the catbird seat. We are the place that we can control our own destiny. Don't worry so much about what people say about the future. Remember when iPads came out? Desktops are going away, everybody. You will never see another desktop. If you're someone who's working on desktops with operating systems and hardware, you'll never have a job again. How'd that go? Same scenario. So I think we work through and understand what we're able to do with this from a practical perspective, and we move forward from there. The hype is hype. The reality is reality. And eventually, these things will all work themselves out. Currently, I don't see any reason to worry about any of it. I think we're in really good shape. I think there are places where we can take advantage of that technology where it makes sense. We can dismiss it where it doesn't make sense. And then we'll be back to where we were. It turns out to be just more of a tool than anything else. Well, gosh, that's pretty much describes Photoshop to me from that perspective. It's just a new version of Photoshop. There you go. My summary of AI in a way that makes no sense whatsoever. Hopefully that will be something you can take with you and think, well, maybe we'll have to keep our eyes open. Maybe we'll just have to see what comes from that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the results will be. I just can't give no one will tell me what that's going to be. It's going to change the world. Great. How's it going to change the world? We don't know. I don't know. Well, it's going to change the way we work with technology. Oh, great. How's it going to change that? We don't know. We have no idea, but they're going to come up with something. What is it going to be? I'm looking forward to seeing it. We just need to let them work out whatever that piece of it is. In the meantime, learn about what they are doing. Learn about understanding the details of technologies and how it works with what you are doing. And you'll be able to at least play in that playground for a bit until they really figure out the details of this. So I think that section of the exam objectives is very important. Understanding bias, understanding hallucinations, understanding where it fits in the world today. And then that, of course, will be an evolving piece of information that we'll be able to use later. I think that'd be super important for those of us that need to work in this industry and really understand if this is something that we're going to have to deal with in the future. I guess there'll be some of it there, but how much? We just don't know yet. So it's very early. I like the idea of thinking about it. I like the idea of talking about it. I like the idea of what could come of it, but we still are in the waiting game at this point, figuring out the details. And I think you sort of see that in the A+ exam objectives. We're giving you that overview, but we're really not there quite yet. If anything, we're trying to figure it out ourselves. We'll get there eventually. Don't worry. Well, I think that brings us to a good place for today's study group. Don't forget, we have more study groups this month. We've got our Network Plus study group next week on Tuesday. We have our Security Plus study group a week after that or so, a week and a day. Be a great time for you to come back and learn all about the Network Plus exam objectives, the Security Plus exam objectives, and of course, we do one of these A+ study groups every month. If you ever want to know when the next live event is going to be, head over to our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. I'll be over on Discord after this, doing quite a few things in the studio. We got a lot of work to do here to bring you even more training materials for your A+, your Network Plus, your Security Plus, and who knows, maybe some other things as well. I want to thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time on the Core 2 A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.